Hello and welcome to the Elder Scrolls Comparison 2. This time, the Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall is included and will be the centerpiece of the comparison to Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim. The reason I've made this video is that some people have asked me to include Daggerfall in the comparison to its sequels. I was also curious about Daggerfall, since before my last game analysis video, which was a first impression of Daggerfall Unity, I had never played it before. And now, even though this video has taken me a long time to finally complete, I will place Daggerfall in a comparison to the other three later games in the Elder Scrolls. So if you haven't checked out my first The Elder Scrolls comparison, then be sure to do that. It's where I compared Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim together for game mechanics, story, lore, and of course my personal opinion. Some of these game mechanics covered in this video weren't brought up in the first one. These games are just so huge that to cover everything in detail might take many more hours than I wish to spend on making a video. So the first question needs to be asked to get this started. What is Daggerfall, and what is Daggerfall Unity? Daggerfall is an open-world action role-playing game published by Bethesda Softworks. It was released on September 20th, 1996 for MS-DOS, 2 years after the first game in the Elder Scrolls series came out, which was called The Elder Scrolls Arena. The Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall, also referred to as The Elder Scrolls Chapter 2 Daggerfall, The Elder Scrolls Daggerfall, or simply Daggerfall. In this game, the Emperor recruits you to exorcise the restless spirit of the late King of Daggerfall, but soon the story unfolds to something far greater than avenging the death of a noble. Daggerfall, like the other games in the Elder Scrolls series, takes place on the fictional continent of Tamriel, in which the player can travel between the provinces of High Rock and Hammerfell. Like all the Elder Scrolls games, the player does not have to follow questlines or fill specific character roles, allowing the player to play the game how they see fit. The game features over 15,000 cities, towns, villages, and dungeons for the character to explore, which gives the player many options when buying a house. In addition to exploring the world, the player can join a number of guilds, orders, and religions, all with unique quests and tasks for the player to do. Joining and contributing to these organizations will allow the player to gain ranks and gain a reputation in the game world, which affects how non-playable characters, NPCs, and other factions view the player. You are seeing the live-action introduction clip of the game after the lengthy character creation. Obviously, the Emperor, shown here along with High Chancellor Okado, looked a bit different back then compared to the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion in their CGI versions. Now as for Daggerfall Unity, thanks to the Herculean efforts of independent developer Gavin Interkarma Clayton, Daggerfall has been fully reverse engineered and ported to the Unity engine. While there's still the occasional rough edge, it's already more polished, stable, and playable than the DOS version ever was, packed with quality of life improvements and fixes for ancient bugs. Even better, it's hugely moddable, and new user-made content for it pops up every day. Game mechanics and my personal experience with Daggerfall Unity will be the basis of this comparison to the other three games. No, I do not plan on going back to do Arena one day as well, just Daggerfall Unity, and that will be it, at least until the Elder Scrolls 6 comes out. I'm an old gamer compared to many today. I started playing video games when I was 5 years old back in around 1981, at a time for me when those games could entertain me for at most half an hour to an hour before my young self moved on to play with something else. Keep in mind I was born in 1975. So yes, I have really seen video game progression in my lifetime. Actually, now that I think of it, that's pretty neat in and of itself, and could even be its own long video, but we are just talking about the Elder Scrolls here. I'm not sure how I missed the first two Elder Scrolls games. I was 18 and bought my own PC in 1994 from working at my first real job. It was my first PC I ever owned. Before that, we just had the family Amiga 500, and before that, the Commodore 64. But remember, there was no real internet at the time, just a bunch of localized networks, and most of it between universities. So if I missed it in a gaming magazine or didn't see it for sale in a store, I wouldn't know it existed. I didn't even know about Daggerfall or Arena until probably around the time Oblivion came out, after doing a little research on the series. I'd played through Morrowind around the year 2003, but I still didn't know the history of the games. I do regret not knowing about these 90s RPGs. Arena came out in 1994 and Daggerfall in 1996, which would have been perfect for me with my first PC. The only RPGs I played at the time and before were a couple of D&D Gold Box games on my Amiga 500 and Eye of the Beholder 2. I think for my PC I just focused on what I knew about at the time, the Dungeons & Dragons games of the 90s, Dark Sun and the Ravenloft type games that came out. But I think I was picky about getting into other RPG universes because I stuck with what I was familiar with, which was the D&D games. However, I did expand my RPGs in the later 90s due to friends telling me how great they were. I did play Diablo in 1997 and Fallout in 1998, Fallout 2 in late 1998. However, I was really looking forward to Baldur's Gate, and that was the first game I ever pre-ordered from a store. Again, another D&D game. However, starting with EverQuest in September of 1999, I stopped playing single-player RPGs. I almost exclusively played MMOs for several years. This until someone in my guild in Dark Age of Camelot from the guild website linked to an article about Morrowind in 2002. I just remember thinking that Dark Elf in the picture looked weird, but it was the first time I noticed Bethesda in their games. I looked into Morrowind a little more and bought it in 2003. I absolutely became enthralled with the game. It was my first open-world RPG, and for me it sort of felt like an MMO without other players. But instead there was a story to follow, which was really lacking in MMOs at the time, other than just a theme and a few quest givers telling you more about the lore. Ironically, though I had read D&D books since the early 90s, it was through playing several MMOs with dedicated role players that got my mind into playing in character, which eventually led to the YouTube channel I have today, Let's Roleplay. Now fast forward to the point of this video coming out, I have now gone back to play Daggerfall in the Unity engine and did quite a few of the main quests as well as many smaller quests, with my character getting up to level 10. For how to get Daggerfall Unity and to get it working, which is free since Bethesda has at some point made it free for everyone, you can go back and check out my last game analysis video, Daggerfall Unity. Is it worth playing? One big difference in this video compared to the Elder Scrolls comparison is that instead of going through each game one at a time, I will be featuring something in Daggerfall Unity and then comparing the other games to it side by side as we go through each part, starting with the character creation. Considering that I have already gone through the mechanics in the first video, pretty much hitting all of it in Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim, I don't feel the need to go through all of that again, only when appropriate to compare them to Daggerfall. I'd also like everyone to take note of the myth that Daggerfall had more game mechanics in place than any other Elder Scrolls game. After playing through it and comparing it to the others, I didn't actually find that to be the case. What it had was different mechanics that weren't in the others, but not so much that it had more, while at the same time the subsequent games had new mechanics that were not in Daggerfall. You'll see this as I go through it all. I will be using Daggerfall and Daggerfall Unity together pretty much throughout this video to mean the same thing, but just remember that Daggerfall Unity is just a better looking and working version of Daggerfall. Daggerfall Unity is Daggerfall, so don't get the impression that these are two different games. Daggerfall Unity is a modded version of the original, essentially. It's like taking an old car that doesn't run too well anymore, fixing it up to look and run better than new. However, it's still the same old car underneath it all, though. Also keep in mind that I'm not perfect, and this video is only from my personal experience. There may be some minor things I have left out. But on the whole, I believe I will provide a good picture of Daggerfall Unity compared to the others. And most of all, this is all subjective. I don't expect everyone to agree with me, but I would like everyone to come with me as I delve into my thoughts and experiences on Daggerfall Unity, because they are just as valid as yours, and it helps to have a different perspective on the matter, even if you don't see it the same way. Okay, so now let's get into it. Now keep in mind that Daggerfall Unity isn't just Daggerfall with better looking visuals, it also addressed many errors, bugs, and overall improved the quality of life from Daggerfall. So it isn't exactly the same as the original, though I believe it is pretty much what everyone back then in 1996 would have wanted for the game if it could be improved. Bethesda is known for their finished games being full of bugs, and typically the quality of life improvements for their games mechanics come with either the next game or in an expansion DLC. Only if you are a masochist or like some old exploit, I'm not sure why anyone would boot up the original Daggerfall today, when you have a working, improved version of the base game now in Daggerfall Unity that accepts a whole host of mods that have been made over the last few years and that are still being improved on and created today. It is the third era, year 405 at the start of Daggerfall, some 28 years before Oblivion and the end of the line of the Septim Emperors. You get a lengthy character creation with quite a lot more than what was in the subsequent games in the Elder Scrolls. Though in my opinion, some of them are pretty fantastic choices to be made. The first mechanic to start with, you choose the province, not the race of the character, and there are only 8 races to choose from. The game treats lycanthropes and vampires as races, though I never became one in my gameplay. Oddly, there are no Imperials or Orcs to play as, which is especially strange, considering that Cyrodiil is the place where the Emperor would have met you and the Empire is held together by Imperials. Also, the province isn't called Cyrodiil, it's called the Imperial Province. And Orcs? They would be in the eastern part of High Rock. I gather from watching YouTube channels like Fudge Muppet that things were different for the Elder Scrolls back then in the 90s. They were more your standard RPG with Orcs the bad guys, though they are present as more than just killable monsters in Daggerfall. I got the feeling that they were in the process of the game's story being elevated to more than just bad guys. Orsimer is the actual name of the orcs in the Elder Scrolls, with the word orc being more of a slang. Here's a quote from the game from the new king of Orsinium. "You are not orcish. How could you possibly understand what it is like? My people are treated like barbarians, slaughtered upon sight. Is it so unusual that we respond in kind? Violence begets violence. Gortwog grow Nagorm." And here's a snippet about him from the lore. King Gortwog grow Nagorm is the king of the Third Orsinium, and the leader of the Orsimer people during the late Third Era. Since his ascension to the throne, he has worked hard to make his people be accepted as citizens of the Empire. He is also strongly against necromancy. When you click on a province, you are given a description of that race that hails from there. Once you choose your race, you then get the choice of gender, which won't affect any skills or attributes. Note that the only gameplay effect of choosing a race, regardless of whether a custom or predefined class is chosen, and regardless of the character's selected gender, will be each race's special advantage. There was a handbook written and published in 1996 for Daggerfall called the Daggerfall Chronicles, and in it there was a table of racial starting statistics that were not actually implemented into the game. Racial bonuses for the 8 races in the game are as follows. Argonian Special Advantage. Reduced fatigue loss while swimming. Can hold breath longer than other races. Breton Special Advantage. Plus 30% resistance to magic. Dark Elf Special Advantage. Bonus damage and chance to hit equals level divided by 4. High Elf Special Advantage. Immunity to paralysis. Khajiit Special Advantage. Plus 30 to climbing checks. As you can see, these aren't really the Khajiits we all know and love. This kind would be called the Alms Rat. In Arena, they look like this, minus the tail, and were just called the Alms. I don't think you can play as this type in any other game, though. Nord Special Advantage. Plus 30% resistance to frost. Redguard Special Advantage. bonus damage and chance to hit equals level divided by 3. Wood Elf special advantage. Bonus damage and chance to hit for archery equals level divided by 3. I know these next two races, lycanthropes and vampires, are not races you choose at character creation, but they are considered a race in the game, with their own unique stats and other qualities. So I decided to put them here next to the other races you choose at the start. For lycanthropes, in Daggerfall you may become infected with one or two forms of lycanthropy, the Curse of the Werewolf or the Curse of the Wereboar. Being infected gives the player access to several unique abilities, but also gives the player several significant weaknesses. Although lycanthropy is thought of as a disease, it is not affected by weaknesses and resistances like other in-game diseases. Only vampires are truly immune to infection. When you are injured by a lycanthrope, there is a 0.6 chance that you will contract the disease. You cannot get infected at level 1. The only sign that you have been infected will occur the first time you rest after contracting the disease. A short scene will play while a voice says, "You dream of the moon, and of a man who is less than a man." 72 hours later, you have contracted the disease. You will turn permanently into a lycanthrope. Until then, the disease can be cured using a potion, spell, or temple healer. If you arrive in a settlement while in were form, the streets will be vacant. Only when you transform back will the citizens reappear. The citizens will not vanish if you transform into your were form while in town. You can still rent a room while in were form, but you cannot buy or sell goods or talk to NPCs. Receiving any items while in were form, i.e. quest rewards, will cause the game to crash. Any crimes you commit in your were form will not be charged to your player character for the purposes of crime. Your were form is essentially a separate person. Lycanthropes get plus 40 to strength, speed, agility, and endurance. These boosts will not raise your attributes past 100 though. These changes apply to your human form as well. Plus 30 to hand, climbing, running, stealth, swimming, jumping, and critical strike skills. These changes also apply to your human form. The 30% boost does not count towards level gains, though the skills can be increased past 100. Access to the ability Lycanthropy, which allows you to change between your normal and lycanthrope forms once a day. All lycanthropes are immune to diseases. Immunity to iron and steel weapons while in were form. Since most humanoid enemies, especially guards, will only attack with these types of weapons, you are immune to their attacks. You can still be harmed by spells and hand-to-hand attacks. Their disadvantages are, you will feel the need to hunt innocents at least twice a month, more specifically every 15 days. 14 days plus the day you start counting. This means you have to kill at least one NPC or guard in a town every 15 days. If you don't, your max health will gradually decrease until it bottoms out at 4 hit points. Once you have killed a peasant or guard, your max health will return to normal until you feel the need to hunt again. During every full moon, you will automatically change into your were form and be unable to change back for the duration of the day. However, you will not change into your were form during fast travel. You will not change back automatically on the next day. You must use the shapeshift spell in your spellbook to return to your humanoid form. Once a year, you will get a letter from a werewolf hunter stating that he has marked you as his next target. He will give you an option to either cure yourself or be hunted by his henchmen, a group of knights. You are unable to access your inventory or pick up items while in werewolf form. To cure lycanthropy, at some point after you become infected with lycanthropy, you will be sent a letter offering you a chance to be cured. If you follow the instructions in the letter, you will be sent to get a sample of your blood to infect the last member of a hereditary family of lycanthropes with. The Coven of Glenmoral also provides players with a chance to remove lycanthropy. Accepting their quest to deliver a potion will instead give you the potion for removing the lycanthropic curse. After curing lycanthropy, you cannot become reinfected with it again. Both lycanthrope types get their around 6 to 8 quests each, some for curing, others for being what they are. Vampirism in Daggerfall is a condition that can affect you after dying from the disease of the same name. You will gain numerous advantages by becoming a vampire, but will have to feed every day in order to survive. In order to become a vampire, you must first acquire the associated disease from a vampire or a vampire ancient. The chance of catching the disease is very low, 1.22% chance per hit, and it's possible to acquire a normal disease instead of vampirism, so getting the disease may take some time and patience. Level 1 characters cannot become vampires. Once you have the disease, you will experience a cutscene depicting an ominous dream the next time you sleep. In the dream it states, your sleep is troubled by nightmares of a beautiful woman whom you murder in a dark place. The disease can still be cured by any temple at this stage. If it is not, then after 3 days you will receive a notification saying death is not always eternal. For some, it is merely a time of waiting. Now is your time of waiting. Be patient, and all will be revealed. After receiving the notification, you will awaken in a tomb. Your character portrait will change and depict you standing in a graveyard. You will have all of the spells and benefits associated with the bloodline of the region in which you died. After you awaken as an undead, you will be able to undergo the rite of acceptance. When you become a vampire, you will gain plus 20 to every attribute except intelligence, plus 30 to climbing, critical strike, hand-to-hand, jumping, running, and stealth, levitation, calm humanoid and charm mortal spells, immunities to paralysis and disease. These advantages only last as long as you remain a vampire. If you are cured, you will lose them forever. Disadvantages. After becoming a vampire, you will take continuous damage from holy places and sunlight, and you will have to feed on blood. Killing any living creature will count as feeding. If you fail to feed every day, you will be unable to rest and so unable to regenerate resources. This is generally a minor inconvenience. Any character can expect to be in near constant combat, and most creatures encountered are living. Another disadvantage is that you can't initiate fast travel. Reputations. Since you have technically died in the process of becoming a vampire, your legal reputation in all regions is reset. You are now a new, previously unknown individual in the eyes of the law. In addition, all guild memberships are revoked. For most guilds, you can simply rejoin and receive a promotion to your previous rank 28 days later. However, guilds which operate by invitation, such as the Thieves Guild and the Dark Brotherhood, are a different trouble, since you can only join those guilds once. Then acquiring vampirism after admission into those ranks prevents you from rejoining those guilds at all, under any circumstance. However, if you have not joined such guilds, they do retain the option to join even in your undead state, and you simply need to trigger the conditions from which an invitation is extended. There are 9 bloodlines in the Iliac Bay, each with their own unique benefits, but all sharing the same quests. These 9 bloodlines each have benefits specific to them and an area of dominion. You will automatically join the bloodline of the area you were infected in, and gain the bloodline's benefits. Choosing character class, you can choose from a list of 18 pre-made ones or create your own, which is what I've always done in every Elder Scrolls game I've played. The other option is to answer 10 questions about your character that will determine the type of class they are. I always found this part of Bethesda games interesting, but I never actually end up using them for my character. But it's nice to answer the questions and see the result. I like to individually select what skills I like to use in my playstyle, so I always go custom class. For me, the Elder Scrolls were never really about being a squishy mage, a less squishy thief, or a well-defended fighter or cleric as it is in Dungeons & Dragons. More like they can all be put into one, and you decide how much you want to dedicate to those skills. So, more like a lightly armored mage that also melees, or a fighter thief, or just a well-skilled fighter who heals himself, casts utility spells to aid him, and can pick locks, which just describe my Morrowind character in my Let's Roleplay. When choosing your class from a predetermined type, you get a brief description of what that class is about, and their skills that are the most important to them, or what skills are the primary, major, and minor. Each class has different primary, major, and minor skills, special advantages, and special disadvantages. As your class will have a significant impact on gameplay, take care to choose or create a class that suits your playstyle. Skills are important for two reasons. The ones you pick start higher than the others, and they also determine when you level up. If you choose to answer 10 questions to figure out what class is best for you, you will be presented with 10 scenarios, each with 3 possible responses. Each of the answers steers your fate in a different direction. While you respond to the questions, there are 3 constellations visible on the screen: Thief, Mage, and Warrior. When you choose an answer, the constellation corresponding to your answer is highlighted by a blue bolt of lightning. With every lightning strike, one of the 3 constellations becomes brighter in the dark blue sky. The scenarios will be presented on a piece of parchment, rolled up at the end. After the 10 questions have been answered, the game will calculate your class dependent on how many types of each answer you choose. You can either accept or decline the given class. If you accept, you will be moved into the next step of character creation, generating your character's background. If you decline, you will be able to manually choose the class you wish from the Choose Class menu, and then continue normally with the character creation process. As a general guide in choosing your actions in these scenarios, warriors are portrayed as honorable and brave people who will never back off on a promise. Mages strive for knowledge, make balanced decisions, and listen to those who are wiser and more experienced. Thieves are innovative, always thinking of new ideas and inventions. However, they are less ethical in their work and always ready to change sides if it means greater profit. For my Argonian Elan with his custom class, I chose as my advantage to regenerate health only in water, but the sheer number of advantages and disadvantages to choose from was pretty large and oddly specific for some, having phobias against Daedra, animals, or undead, and a whole list of things like that, as you can see here. You will next generate a background for your character based on your class or the class you are most like if you created a custom class, which will affect your starting skills, equipment, and reputation. You can either have the game randomly generate your background or answer a series of questions to exert more control over the process. This isn't like choosing your class. You can get benefits and penalties from choosing each one, which will make your character quite unique. You can see some of it here. These background questions generate additional characteristics of your character. After choosing your class, you can either answer these questions or have the game randomly answer them for you. Each question gives you items, skills, or reputation. Some even give you a small disadvantage. Note that some classes might not have some of the answers available, even though they are listed as having the question. For custom character classes, you will get the questions from a class that matches your skills the most. The answers you choose will also be reflected on your character's personal history. Next, type a name for your character and select a face based on your chosen race and gender. Neither will affect your character's abilities. As you can see, the amount of faces to choose from is quite limited. In this example, I chose Skyrim, female, answered the questions, and was given the rogue class, which I accepted. After determining your starting attributes, you will be shown your starting skill values and given an opportunity to distribute 6 bonus points among your primary skills, 6 points for your major skills and 6 points for your minor skills. You are given this page and can choose from 3 primary, 3 major, and 6 minor skills. There are 35 skills in total in Daggerfall, with a large number of these skills not in the other 3 games. Several of them are language skills, like for giants or orcs, or just separate skills that they felt weren't really necessary, such as swimming, dodging, backstabbing, or critical strike, which determines your critical hit chance. Personally, I don't feel that half of them are even necessary. Thaumaturgy is an additional magical school that was removed in Morrowind. Its spells were Levitate and Water Walking. Sounds more appropriate for the Alteration school, if you ask me. Primary skills will start with 25 points, major skills will start with 15 points, minor skills will start with 10 points. Miscellaneous skills will start with 0 points. If a skill is modified by background choices, then it will be increased by those values directly with no randomization. If a skill is not modified by background, it will instead be increased by a random roll of 3 to 6 extra points. Finally, you will be asked to select a reflex level, which is intended to determine how quickly your foes move and attack, and is inversely related with how fast your character improves their skills. The next screen will show an overview of your character, and given one last chance to make adjustments, restart the process, or begin the game. After a character has been created, their personal history prior to starting the main quest can be accessed from the character sheet. This story is formed from a template based on your class, or closest if using a custom class, and incorporates many elements from the background questions. This background is for my rogue Argonian character, Elan. You were born to a peasant family in a tiny village in the swamps of Blackmarsh. Your parents and older brothers were hard workers, proud of their strength and endurance. The only thing big about you was your appetite. You were of an inquisitive nature. No cupboard, closet, or drawer was safe from your prying eyes and fingers. You left no traces, but still your father and brothers beat you when they caught you. By the time you were 11, they no longer caught you. Your mother taught you knife fighting and swimming, but you had no other schooling and wanted none. Once you climbed the wall of the local palace and spied on the young squires at practice. When their equipment was left lying about, you took it for your own. In this way, you acquired a short sword. You also adopted a jacket shed by its owner and wore it proudly about the village. One day you saw some village boys hurling stones and insults at an old woman named Athena Cason. Moved by impulse you did not understand, you flung rocks back at the boys. They laughed, but as you drew near, they turned and ran away. You went back to Athena Cason and offered to see her to her door. "Come inside," Athena Cason said. "I have something for you." Her cottage was just one room, with cats and kittens everywhere. "Sit down," she said, removing 2 cats from a stool. "I'm going to teach you about dodging." "Why?" you asked. "The cats don't need training in dodging," Athena Cason said. "You do, or will, no matter." Thus your training began. Her hands could no longer perform, but her mind was still efficacious. You and Athena Cason became friends, as well as student and teacher. On your 16th birthday, she told you that you must leave. Your little village was too small for someone of your talents. "What of you?" you asked. "I also must move on." "Perhaps someday you will visit me in the Iliac Bay?" "I would like that. Until then, I have my memories and my cats." On your way to the Imperial City, you stopped in an inn, and heard that the Emperor was to pass the next day. Instead of sneaking into a room, you spent the night in a tree beside the road. You wanted to see the Emperor. Later, there would always be chances to break into some merchant's house. The procession was very splendid indeed, but a nearby rustle drew your attention. A black-clad man was crouching on a limb 10 feet beneath you. You gasped before you could stop yourself, and he twisted around, bringing his bow to bear on you. With no time to draw a weapon, you flung yourself at him, and together you crashed down on the heads below, just as the Emperor's carriage drew abreast. Hands seized you roughly. You felt dizzy, and a trail of fire burned along your left arm. Poison! Then a white-robed elf muttered an incantation over you. Your arm cooled and your head cleared. The Emperor himself thanked you and gave you an ebony dagger. The local folk treated you to drinks and food and unaccustomed praise. Later, you slipped away and found that in addition to an ebony dagger, the Emperor had handed you a note inviting you to share an audience with him at the Imperial Palace. You set out immediately. As you can see, this has to be about the most extensive character creation I have ever seen in any RPG. In Morrowind, character creation is a much simpler process. You select your race and then your face right after you begin walking off the ship you started in. Then you walk into the building and decide all the rest of it. At least it didn't sync this time like it does at the game's start of Daggerfall, leaving you stranded in some old cave that was part of the starting dungeon. The races have their own set starting attributes and resistances, but it's all too numerous to go into here. Let's just say it got a lot more complicated this time around in Morrowind. Each race now gets not only different starting attributes, but also skill bonuses, and specials such as the Argonians getting a spell for water breathing, the ability to be 100% resistant to poison and 75% resistant to disease. Yes, Daggerfall had their special advantages with their races, but other than looks, that was the only differences. Everything else was decided by your class, skills chosen, and background. Now we have different attributes, skill bonuses, unique racial spells on top of the special advantages. With all of this, the races are much more fleshed out in their differences, beyond just one advantage in the look. This is far beyond what was in Daggerfall. Now, being a race allows you to not only play differently, but allows a role player to feel unique. Also, this time around in Morrowind, gender has a small effect on how stat points are spread out when choosing any particular race. The same goes for Oblivion and Skyrim. Both get their different starting attributes and specials, though I think they toned it down somewhat in Oblivion and Skyrim, and didn't hand out the strong bonuses anymore like they used to. Being 100% immune to poison and 75% resistant to disease is pretty powerful. Starting with Morrowind, you can play as 10 races, not 8 as in Daggerfall. Orcs and Imperials have been added as races to play as to the previous 8. This is the same for both Oblivion and Skyrim. Vampires and lycanthropes are not races in Morrowind. I guess they are just a special kind of disease now because you get to keep your race and class, yet what else could you classify this new power you have other than a disease? Originally, lycanthropy wasn't in the game, and I remember how unhappy some people were about that, but it was added back in with Morrowind's Blood Moon expansion. Surprisingly, as I go through the differences between the games, you'll see that some things were taken away between them, but a lot was also added in to compensate in other ways. In Morrowind, every humanoid character has a class, including your character and all NPCs. A character's class reflects their occupation, their position in society, or simply what sorts of things they are good at. In game terms, class comprises 3 different aspects of a character: specialization, favored attributes, and major minor skills. Together, these choices have significant impact on the state of your character at the start of the game, as well as how they will develop as they increase in level. When you create a character, you will either create a custom class or use one of the game's 21 predefined player character classes. NPCs also use these classes, and there are many NPC-only classes. They increased the number of classes in Morrowind compared to Daggerfall, and with NPC-only classes they've added even more. Which actually surprised me, because I was under the notion that from Daggerfall onwards it was a steady removal of game mechanics to simplify it. In some cases this is true, especially when looking at the attributes of Skyrim compared to the 3 previous games in the series, but that's not always the case. The same thing as in Daggerfall, you can choose your class outright, answer 10 questions to determine your class, and, my favorite, going with a custom class. In the case of Morrowind, I always liked answering the questions because it was one of the largest spoken parts of the game, and back in 2002, 2003 when I played it, that was sort of a big deal. Again, I always go with custom class. It just makes it more tailored to who I want to play. I really like the idea of being able to name that class to whatever I want. This was consistent from Daggerfall to Oblivion. If going custom class in Morrowind, you choose from 3 specializations: combat, magic, or stealth. Choose 2 attributes to favorite, which raises them higher than the others, and then choose 5 major, 5 minor skills, which not only elevates them higher, but are now the skills required to level for that character. Unlike Daggerfall, this time you choose from one of 13 birth signs for a bonus or a penalty, or both. This is just more of what was added post-Daggerfall, and what wasn't in Daggerfall. However, only Daggerfall of the 4 games had a background to go through. This, I think, was an unfortunate loss. I really enjoyed fleshing out your character more than just choosing or creating your class and birth sign, but I can see others taking an exception to having a personal history written for you. For Oblivion, character creation was much different than the 2 games before it. You don't just choose from a set list of pictures for your character. You choose your race and sex, and then you can sculpt your face to your liking. They added in racial relations, or how they interact with each other. Though I cannot say that this wasn't in Morrowind, there wasn't any mention of it when looking it up on the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages. While largely governed by your choices of gender and race, you can also fine-tune most aspects of your character's physical appearance. These choices have no effect upon gameplay. The previous clip was a heavily modified version to make all characters in the game look better. This is what it really looked like unmodded. Face sculpting was pretty new for video games at the time in 2006, and though the faces of Oblivion in general looked pretty bad and it wasn't easy to create a decent looking one, it was still, in my opinion, a huge step forward. Again, each race gets their bonus and special abilities along with a spell they typically can use once per day, just like in Morrowind. This is also in Skyrim as well. However, between Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim, though they may have kept the general theme the same for each race, they did modify them slightly in each game. This time there are 21 classes to choose from, or you can create your own custom one. However, there is no one asking you questions for you to answer to determine your class in the game. What they have done instead is create a lengthy tutorial, and depending on how you play through it, you are presented at the end with a class. You can still say yes or no and then decide your class or go with a custom one. So you see, this is a case of the mechanics being different, not removed just to cater to a larger group of people who aren't necessarily into RPGs, aka dumbed down mechanics. And I'd argue that this is actually a more natural way of just choosing your class outright from the beginning, or answering questions. Along with the tutorial, you are also given the introduction to the story of the game, and witness the death of the escaping Emperor by assassins from the Mythic Dawn, who have killed nearly everyone in his entire line. So you learn how to play the game, see the story begin, with you being a part of it, and you get your determined class at the end. How is this not better than choosing it all from a list? No one who has played Oblivion will ever forget the death of the Emperor right in front of you. Skills also lose a chunk from Morrowind here, going down to 21 from 27, whereas Daggerfall had 35. Consolidation doesn't mean it's all bad, however certain things like putting blunt and axe weapons in the same skill doesn't make much sense. So in this case, no, I don't agree with Bethesda's decision, and a couple of these skills could have been handled better. In Skyrim, they have one- and two-handed skills, which with perks allow you to choose what type of weapon you are specializing in, such as axe or a mace for one-handed. So you can say they broke away from blunt being both axe and mace. The melee skills removed from Morrowind were spear, blunt, axe, short blade, and long blade. In Oblivion, they were consolidated into just blunt and blade. That was a bad choice, but again, I believe it was fixed in Skyrim, other than losing the spear skill altogether, that is. After you decide your choice in class, and the initial part of the Oblivion story has been completed in the tutorial, you still have to exit the sewers, which will take a little bit, especially if you are still getting used to the game. Once you reach the end of the sewers, however, you get to make your final choice in everything about creating your character. So if you ask me, this is actually the longest character creation so far out of the Elder Scrolls games. Skyrim's intro scene and escaping the dragon would probably be the second longest, but for Oblivion, the average player would most likely take an hour or more to go through it. This is in stark contrast to just a screen full of character stats as it was in Daggerfall. I believe this way is much more engaging and an improved way of starting out, instead of only picking classes, skills, and making choices like for your background as it was in Daggerfall and Morrowind. Yes, I'm actually praising Oblivion here, which is my least liked game from the Elder Scrolls comparison. Now as to vampirism and lycanthropy, which doesn't even feel like it should be addressed in the character creation part of Oblivion, but it was started with Daggerfall as part of the races in the game, so I will put that in here for Oblivion. Yes, you can become a vampire in the game. I actually mistakenly had that happen to my character Malcolm Montrose in Oblivion, and I did feed on people a few times. It is a bit odd that I didn't see the signs and my character became a vampire, but it genuinely happened. By the time I realized something was happening with Malcolm's dreams, it was too late to cure it by cure disease. I have never actually tried to become a vampire in any Elder Scrolls game, and this was an accident, but one I think I actually enjoyed role-playing through. I honestly had no way of knowing how it worked, and I didn't even look it up until I found out the hard way that if you don't feed on others, your face turns into a horror show, displaying for all the world to see that you are a vampire, and no one wants anything to do with you. In this state, you cannot buy or sell with merchants. With taking constant damage from the sun, I was put into a situation that forced me to feed on resting NPCs at night and stick to sleeping during the day. Which was an interesting experience for me, especially since I didn't choose to become a vampire. I went through a lengthy process to have my character cured of vampirism in my Let's Roleplay. As for lycanthropy, there is none in Oblivion, not even any werewolves to be found. The simplest of all 4 games when it comes to character creation goes to Skyrim. There are no classes to choose from at all, and instead you decide where to put the perks you get from each level and develop your character throughout the game. This is a much different mechanic for your character compared to any other Elder Scrolls game before it. Class is completely gone, and instead you play your own way. Every level you add a perk into one of the many different perk trees and can improve a skill going up this tree. This isn't a character starting out skilled, this is a character developing their own personal unnamed class throughout the entire playthrough. Of course you can name it one if you would like. You start out a prisoner like in the previous 2 games, this time on a prisoner cart, being taken to what is supposed to be your execution. Like Oblivion, you get thrown a lot of story your way about who you are, where you are, and what is going on in the province. Creating your character is the first decision that you must make when playing Skyrim. Although you are presented with a wide variety of options for altering your character's appearance, the only decision that affects subsequent gameplay is your chosen race. Your character's capabilities are more strongly affected by how you choose to play the game and by choices made when you level up, than by your initial character creation. The factors that you must decide upon are your race, which determines skill bonuses and special abilities, greater powers, lesser powers, constant effects, characteristics. Your sex. Your character's sex has no effect on skills or abilities. However, NPCs will address you differently and may treat you differently depending upon your sex. The Allure perk in speech skill allows you to get 10% better prices with the opposite sex. Also, there is a quest that provides you with the added bonus of dealing more damage to the opposite sex. As there are more male shopkeepers and enemies, female characters garner a greater benefit from these effects. For certain races, your height is dependent on your sex, as movement speed is a function of height. It is indirectly affected by sex. Neither sex will stop you from any spouse choices. Your appearance. While largely governed by your choices of gender and race, you can also fine-tune most aspects of your character's physical appearance. These choices have no effect on gameplay. Your character name. Your character name has no effect on gameplay. It will appear in menus and occasionally in written notes and dialogue options. When initially choosing a race, think about what type of class or classes you want to emulate foremost. If, for example, you want to steal and sneak attack your enemies without being detected, you should consider Khajiit for their initial bonus and night vision powers. Or you could choose to be Argonian for their initial ability to pick locks better than any other race. Alternatively, if you would prefer to fight your enemies head-on, a Nord, Orc, or Redguard may be preferable, due to their initial boosts to combat stats and natural resistances. Likewise, mage classes would find being a Breton or High Elf to be the most beneficial, given their innate magical bonuses. If you want to be an archer or other marksman, you should choose the Wood Elf. Unlike Oblivion, starting skills only matter in early gameplay due to no willpower type attributes. It can be difficult to level up certain thieving skills if your race does not have a bonus. Sneaking and pickpocketing will fail very often early on, and failed attempts do not gain experience. Lockpicking will still gain experience on failed attempts, but the amount is minimal. Most other skills such as magic or weaponry always succeed in earning experience when used against a valid target, and thus always give a skill experience whether they start at 15 or 25. Note that race affects many other small factors in dialogue throughout the game. Many aspects of your character's appearance can be customized, although they do not affect skills in any way as they are purely cosmetic. Weight. Increasing the weight slider increases your character's muscles. Skin color. eye color, hair color and style, war paint and or tattoos, fur patterns for Khajiit, dirt presence, scars, beard for male characters, jewelry such as earrings for specific races, feathers, horns for the Argonians only. Aside from the initial character creation, the only way to change your appearance is by becoming a vampire or completing the quest Surgery, which is only available after the Dawn Guard add-on is installed. The quest cannot be completed by vampires, and neither race nor gender can be changed. The Standing Stones are magical stones found in the wilderness which can give your character special abilities and powers. There are 13 Standing Stones in total, each associated with one of Tamriel's 13 constellations. Birth signs. Really. Usually only one stone effects can be active at a time, although you can change which stone is active at any time by activating a different Standing Stone. Again, it's just different, not removed. In fact, I'd say birth signs have been greatly expanded upon, as they are now something you can find out in the wilderness while exploring, but also change at any time you want. There have always been 8 attributes, and now in Skyrim you only have 3. It can be argued that personality is now in the perk tree, and that may be so, but still I really think one can have that attribute and the perk tree for it to increase it. Strength, intelligence, willpower, agility, speed, endurance, personality, and luck have been reduced to health, stamina, and magicka. My guess is that strength was put into health, endurance was split into health and stamina, speed is removed completely, as is agility and luck. Intelligence and willpower were consolidated into magicka. I find this to be a big mistake, but although I don't like it, I won't condemn Skyrim to be garbage because of it. It's just something I'll have to live with, as will everybody else. Both vampires and lycanthropes are in the game, and you can become one as well. Like all the previous games, you get bonuses and penalties for playing as one. With the Dawn Guard expansion, they have really focused on vampires this time around. I haven't gone through the Skyrim expansions, and I am still working my way through this expansion in my current Let's Roleplay of Skyrim, but that will change soon. At least this time around, I have over 50 videos up on my channel of my Skyrim Let's Roleplay to show in a video like this if need be. I didn't have that in the last Elder Scrolls comparison video, because I hadn't started Skyrim Let's Roleplay yet. The conclusion for character creation I have reached is that it's obvious that everything was a stat you can change around at the beginning of Daggerfall before you take your first step into the game world. This was reduced somewhat to be slightly more interactive in Morrowind, and then in Oblivion, greatly interactive in how your class is created. This also carried on into Skyrim, but was greatly expanded to your class, and is now determined by you throughout your entire game with the skill tree perks. Again, other than the attribute consolidation in Skyrim, I don't think anything was dumbed down, but rather just changed, greatly changed. The change is radically different between Daggerfall and Skyrim, granted, but when I now think of the perk trees in Skyrim, I would not want to get rid of them. The only way to keep them is to have them play out throughout the entire game as it is in Skyrim. It's just different, but I don't think anything was lost, not at all. It's just more of a gradual experience rather than everything at the beginning. It's up to the individual if they like it better or not. Personally, I like the perk trees much more. My only real dislike is the 3 attributes down from 8.
Excuse the gloom, but none may know of this meeting. The nature of my trouble is darker still. Over a year ago, King Lysandus of Daggerfall died honorably on the field of battle. He was as loyal a subject, ally, and friend as you are. I did grieve for him, but his spirit does not rest. With a spectral army, he haunts his former kingdom, crying for revenge. I do not know why a good and loyal man would be so cursed. Perhaps you can find the answer. and close the marble jaws of Oblivion, bringing peace to his soul. I ask this as your Emperor and your friend. I have one lesser request. Several years ago, I wrote a letter to the Queen of Daggerfall. It never arrived. The letter was of a sentimental and personal nature. If you find and destroy that letter, I will be grateful. Now, my champion, rest well this night, for tomorrow you sail for the kingdom of Daggerfall.
Back when they used live acting in the mid-90s. That was supposed to be High Chancellor Ocado next to him, without the ears. You wake and look around the room. Some hours ago you were in a boat en route to Daggerfall when a storm of supernatural strength boiled over the Iliac Bay like a malefic creature. Your boat was destroyed, but you managed to swim through the churning water to a promontory rock. Oh, as I swim so well, hopefully that'll help. There you found a cave and escaped the fury of the storm. You had only just lit a small fire when a mudslide sealed you within. Your fear of being buried alive calmed when you saw the corridor leading out of the cavern. Perhaps there is a way out of this cave after all. Once free of the cave, you can begin the Emperor's quest. That was all recorded from my last video, Is Daggerfall Unity Worth Playing? This part of the video will be all about my experiences playing Daggerfall. After creating your character, you are given a video showing you a live action scene of the Emperor and High Chancellor Ocado meeting with you in secret about an important mission he's entrusting to you. You are to go to High Rock and Hammerfell to carry out this important task. But of course something bad happens along the way and your ship gets destroyed in a storm, leaving you in some cave that is part of the first among many dungeons of the game. By lore, it took the hero 12 in-game years to complete this quest, and thankfully you don't have to return to the Emperor to get that line Bethesda likes to include from their NPCs once you've accepted a quest from them. Have you completed that task I gave you? Now after all of that, you will set sail for Daggerfall. Your ship will crash and your character will then start the game in Privateer's Hold. You'll get a lengthy description of how you ended up in the cave, and from here on in, it's just you learning how to do what, from my experience, comprises about 80% of the game, going through dungeons. If you don't like the dungeon experience in this game, then you simply won't like the game. They expect you to spend a lot of time in these places, so it's best to get used to the mechanics of it. Daggerfall comes with an in-game text tutorial, which I think for everyone just playing it for the first time is invaluable. Otherwise, people would be scrambling for some website for answers on what key does what, and how to play this old and weird game. I cannot say if the original game had an in-game tutorial, or if this is for Daggerfall Unity only. However, it did say that Daggerfall comes with a tutorial, so I will make the assumption that it's from the original game, because if I was the one who created Daggerfall Unity, you can be sure that I would have written Daggerfall Unity comes with a tutorial, not just Daggerfall. The first thing I learned was to throw out any thoughts of the keys on my keyboard being the same ones used from Morrowind onwards. None of them are where Bethesda has been using them for the last 20 or more years. As for movement, I'm guessing that the WASD keys are from Daggerfall Unity and not the original, because these keys have been standard for movement in the vast majority of games since around the turn of the millennium. Readying your weapon is odd. You have to hit the Z key, or Z key up here in Canada, to bring it up. And if you are holding two different weapons, such as a bow in one hand and a dagger in the other, you press the H button to switch, but you'll have to wait a painful amount of time to switch to the other weapon. This often when you are under attack by some monster, so hitting them with an arrow or two, then quickly switching to melee is sort of out of the question. However, your switch weapon time decreases when raising your speed attribute. Third-person view is not in Daggerfall at all. This began with Morrowind, and though was a little rough back then, it improved a bit for Oblivion and improved even more for Skyrim. In fact, there are a lot of Skyrim mods that cater to third-person play only, sort of like how it is with the Witcher games. Again, another thing added in later that Daggerfall lacked. The only way to see your character in the game is in the inventory screen. Paralyzed, can't move or attack. Yay, I did it. That was just the recorded times doing this. You can imagine how many times I had to actually attempt to get through this part. Combat. WoW combat. How it took me a while to get the hang of it. I, of course, stubbornly went in blindly, and I still haven't looked up the best way to do it. You have to remember, games since around 2000 didn't really require one to read a manual, and you just had to get into it and figure it out as you go. At least that's how I tend to play. If any game has a difficult area to master, especially if you're fighting against other players, then yes, I will look up how to do something better. Oftentimes though, these are just how to defeat a boss in games for me. This after failing to beat them many times. 80s and 90s PC games tended to have manuals that you needed to go through, not because you might not be able to figure out how to play the game, but because some things were just not obvious. Today, on top of being fairly easy for this 42-year-old gaming veteran to figure out, there is usually something in the game that explains it, a tooltip or an in-game tutorial. However, just basic information is given in the Daggerfall in-game tutorial. I know how to do things, but not how best to do them. So when I went up against enemies and I had to reload 10 times just to kill one random dungeon monster or two, I figured out that, hey, this is really an old-school game that wasn't made to hold your hand. This coming from someone who beat Jedi Knight Fallen Order and Jedi Knight Survivor on medium. Except the end boss, or the Darth Vader fight in Jedi Survivor. I could have done it, but by then I had lost patience with dying around 100 times. Thankfully, I was able to lower the difficulty and get past those parts, then raise them back up afterwards. Playing this game actually reminded me of playing a Souls-type game, even though I've never really played one. The two Jedi Knight games have been compared to the Souls games in terms of difficulty, however. Oddly enough, I think it's more difficult at first in Daggerfall. Combat tended to get easier for me as I leveled up. It was the first 3 levels that were frustrating for me, more so because I just didn't know the full game mechanics, yet I assumed I did because of all my experience in the later Elder Scrolls games. At one point in the main story, I had to deliver a letter to a necromancer, the infamous King of Worms Mannimarco. He seems to like popping up in a lot of Elder Scrolls games since Oblivion. So I make it out there at level 3, and there are 2 zombies blocking me in a room from going to see the King of Worms. They're just zombies and should be easy pushovers, right? Wrong. I wasn't even able to kill one of them. I eventually just ran through the room past the zombies who gave chase. I went down the corridors looking for the right room to go in to see the King of Worms. The room with the King of Worms has liches and other nasty things in it that can kill you in one hit, or just look at you and you die. But none will attack you unless you attack them. However, this being an old school game, of course everything else in the dungeon will aggro on you. I did look up a zombie online to see its stats. They were actually just level 1, but they could do more damage in one hit than I had for health at level 3. A few levels later, I encountered one again and quite easily killed it. Yep, old school game. You gotta just get that drilled into you in order to accept the difficulty and play. As I said, the vast majority of the game will be spent in dungeons, so you better get used to it if you want to play Daggerfall. One odd thing about dungeons in the game is sometimes the difficulty in finding them outdoors, at least at first. So you travel to some place, but there are no large cave entrances that can easily be seen? Well, that's because the dungeon entrances are small and the opening can only be seen from one side. You aren't put in front of the entrance by traveling there either. Typically you have to look around to find them. You get used to looking for the little mound after a while though. When you go into a dungeon, kill something, leave, then come back, everything will have respawned. There was also a time when I came back and all the monsters in there were changed from 100% undead to all bandits. If you drop anything anywhere in a dungeon, leave, then come back, it will be gone. The dungeon completely resets when you leave. However, your map of the place will always remain how it was, and much of going through Daggerfall dungeons is about your map in order to find the quest objective. You'll always be looking for that last corridor or room you didn't explore until you get what you came for. Your character's movement speed and weapon melee speed starts slowing down when getting closer to your weight carry limit, so you will have to keep in mind just how much you are carrying. To help with this, you can buy a cart to load any items you carry in, and when you go to a dungeon, all you have to do is go back to the entrance of the dungeon, but do not leave. And when you click on the exit, it will ask if you want to use your cart or leave the dungeon. Just using the cart allows you to remain inside, and you'll get to offload all those items that are weighing you down. See? This game is very dungeon-centered. You can randomly go to any dungeon and try to clear it out. However, when it comes to going to a dungeon for a quest, the primary concern of yours is now finding that one thing you were sent there for, which you need to kill, deliver to, or bring back. These are not always easy to find either. The map in Daggerfall Unity really helped me, but it took some time getting used to it. For instance, I just needed to find a scroll in a large dungeon, and I had explored and cleared out the entire thing without seeing it. Then I looked it up to find out how to get it, and there were 4 randomly different places in the dungeon where it could be. So by process of elimination, I checked each spot, only to find that this one little alcove that you reach by pulling a lever to take you up to it was where it was. I never found things like this in the subsequent games. Morrowind didn't make it difficult to find things. When you found what you came for in a dungeon, it was pretty obvious. Whereas for Oblivion and Skyrim, the little arrow on the map and compass made it impossible to miss. I managed to get halfway through the main story of Daggerfall, and I actually started to see why people like the game around this point. Around level 4, my character, being a rogue, went to a pawn shop to sell my items. Turns out it was just before the store opened in the morning, and the door was locked. I looked around and there were no guards or anyone in the streets just yet, so I decided to unlock the door, which I was successful in, and go in and see what I could take. After grabbing everything that was valuable, I was able to get around 4,000 to 5,000 in gold worth of items that I took to another store to sell. This allowed me to get a horse, which then really boosted my speed everywhere I went, not only in the 3D world, but when I fast traveled to other places too. Just don't use run when on horse around people in a town or city. You can easily run over someone and then get the guards after you for it. Yes, if you haven't noticed by now, the game has a lot of 2D characters and some game clutter such as skulls and other things. It is a bit strange, yes, but obviously it was done to save space in those old limited DOS games of the 90s. Let's just say that the 3D ones, those can fight you, but the 2D ones, they're just for talking to. The world is huge, as I said, with over 15,000 cities, towns, villages, and dungeons. I felt quite overwhelmed when I first started playing it. That number, though realistic in a real world, for an RPG just felt ridiculously high. Of course, the towns and villages were cloned versions of each other for the most part. The difference was in Hammerfell, though, where the coloring and style of buildings changed. I put in a mod to give them a more realistic roofing style, one that you'd see in North Africa in our world, instead of the original medieval European style. On top of this, there are many different kingdoms strewn throughout both High Rock and Hammerfell provinces. The kingdoms would have hundreds of places to go to in each one. Not only is there that large number of places to visit, but getting to them could take hours of real-life time to travel from one place to another. I've heard to get from one end of the map to the other could take many real-life days of travel time without using fast travel, so of course fast travel is the way to get from one place to the next on the map. With so many named places, thankfully they have a search option that allows you to put in each kingdom to find that one place that you are looking for to travel to. Even if you don't spell it out completely, it will return with a small list of places that come close to what you typed in, which is very helpful. There are various options to choose when fast traveling, using inns or camping outdoors, being on foot, or using a horse or boat. You can buy boats in the game and even own homes, but I never got to that point in my game. However, you can use boats to fast travel, which I did do. It's more expensive but can save you many days, sometimes even half the travel time. I assume you just pay someone at a dock that is going in the direction that you're traveling and board their ship. Strangely enough, I never heard about this missing feature in Daggerfall and discovered it on my own. There are no armor or shield skills at all in the game. These were first introduced in Morrowind. Many quests in the game have time limits. In fact, I found the vast majority of them were like this. So the time it takes to get there and back to the quest giver is pretty important. This is where cutting down the travel time can be essential. It can get complicated when you have multiple quests with their different timers all going at the same time. Paying more to board a ship to cut down the travel time can be helpful. Referring to your list of quests and determining how best to get them done in the time you have is an important part of Daggerfall. Yes, time spent going through a dungeon and resting there was also part of the overall time you had when doing these quests. None of which is even in the subsequent games. There is fast travel in Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim. However, the game world is vastly smaller, with just a tiny fraction of the cities, towns, villages, and dungeons that are in Daggerfall. Time never really matters a game rule in these other games, but occasionally your quest giver would tell you that time is important. Though it seems like you can still just do everything at your own pace, and it's always okay. I found myself resting a lot in Daggerfall dungeons to get my health back. You just have to make sure it's away from any monsters. However, even if that is so, you can still get a random encounter when sleeping that will wake you up. Thankfully, they don't get a free hit on you, as they always seem to appear a bit down the corridor when they come at you. Learning a minor healing spell and using that really helped me out, especially in the middle of combat. Funny enough, for quite a few of my quests, I went around asking people, anyone really that I could see, to ask where so-and-so is in the city or where this place was that I was looking for. This is where the skills of etiquette and streetwise can come into play. It helps to improve one or both of them in order to get information from someone. Most people are very unfriendly towards you, especially at the beginning. I don't know if it was because I was an Argonian or not, but there was always one person that would know where the person or place was and let me know. They didn't always do it, but oftentimes they would mark it on my map. When you look at a city or town map, you will see just a bunch of building shapes, with either the color for a guild, shop, or tavern. If you haven't visited the place yet, you won't know what the name of the place is. So when they mark it on your map, it can be much more helpful than just saying, I think it's north of here. There was one quest where I was searching for this thief who had stolen a book, and I must have asked around 100 people if they knew where this person could be found. This until one NPC told me, why not ask at the bookstores, they probably know. And guess what? They did know where the person I was looking for was hiding out. Yes, all the people from kings to merchants can chat with you about any subject in a list of general questions that you have. When it comes to a quest, NPC, or place, that option will be available for you to ask them about it as well, until the quest is completed and then it disappears from the options. I found it rather funny when the book merchant told me that this book thief hangs out at a specific tavern in the city, and when I went there, the thief whom I found there in a room told me that he heard that I've been asking around about him before saying he won't surrender and attacked me. Overall, I had the impression that the game is centered around dealing with the important people of the kingdoms, doing quests for them and gaining a reputation. This in order to get the main story quests, and accomplishing those quests are at the heart of the game. Yes, for many of the quests, especially the main quest, you had to impress someone that is part of the faction first, so gaining a good reputation among the elites of High Rock and Hammerfell is pretty essential. You have to perform a minor quest for the person or faction in order to get the important quests, or even to join that faction. It's like putting you through a test first. If you get a disease, having a potion to cure it can not only be life-saving, but save your sanity. I had decreasing carry weight because I was sick with some disease, and when I was finished at that dungeon and tried to fast travel home, I was warned that I wasn't well enough to travel. I did so anyway, and as soon as my destination loaded up, my character died due to no health. What I had to do was find the nearest settlement, hope that there was a temple there, and fast travel to it. Thankfully, I found one after a couple of small settlements that had nothing. I was able to cure my disease from a priest and then go on my way. After that, I made it a point to buy some cure disease potions and have a few with me at all times. It helps to have that in all the Elder Scrolls games, or to memorize the cure disease spell. Diseases have always been present in these games, but I never had one kill me on its own before. In Daggerfall, there is a cure disease spell in the Restoration School, but even though I bought it, I never attained the magicka necessary to cast it. I had to laugh when I rescued my first NPC, and they in fact joined me by a little icon of their face going down to the bottom left of the screen. Makes sense in an old game like this. No hassle pathfinding for an NPC to keep up with me, or worrying about them being attacked by enemies. This way it keeps it simple. If I die, they die too. And finally, lockpicking doors and secret doors. I never did quite get lockpicking in the game, and this coming from a thief-type character. I don't think it was because it was too complicated, I think the reverse. It was too simple. You seem to only get one chance to unlock a door or chest, and if you fail that, then you either have to wait a few in-game hours or you just resort to bashing the door open. Funny enough, the NPCs can also bash open doors to get at each other or to you. Yes, they even fight each other sometimes, and you can also hear them bashing the doors open from a distance. I didn't come across too many chests in the game, as nearly everything was either on a dead monster or just lying on the floor. As mentioned above, there are secret doors in dungeons. How I discovered them usually came from monsters clipping their bodies out of the wall, but not all of them are like that. You can go around hitting walls with your weapon, and if it makes the door bashing sound, then you found a secret door. So here are some of the highlights of my gameplay experiences, both good and bad. I actually started to have fun in the game once I got used to it. I think at a time in the later half of the 90s, this would have been the ultimate RPG, at least for me, alongside the other greats like the Fallout games and Baldur's Gate. If I had had this game, it would have been my favorite of them all back then, I'm pretty sure. Now we come to the game mechanics part. One thing to note, and one that I was confused about before playing the game, was that of randomly generated dungeons for Daggerfall. You know, when not only is the spawn random and the quest target item location random, but the entire shape of the dungeon too. However, I learned that Daggerfall only randomizes the quest item location and fully respawns monsters who can also become a different type when you come back inside. So like I said before, it went from all undead to all bandits. However, dungeons tend not to be all just one type. Alongside the bandits, there can also be bats, rats, bears, spiders, scorpions, etc. There was a variety of undead inside these places too. Some places are full of orcs as well. Here's a brief part about how dungeons worked in Arena, the original Elder Scrolls game. The game utilizes randomly generated content to generate a massive world without much effort on the developer's part. A consequence of the random generation is that outside of the 17 designed dungeons, areas are reset on exit. Therefore, it is not possible to clear these dungeons, as they will infinitely respawn enemies. It also means that unlike games from Morrowind onward, any loot dropped inside the location will vanish on exit, making carrying capacity even more important than in later games. I had actually thought the randomly generated dungeon in its layout, size, shape was also in Daggerfall, but rest assured it is not. That is purely an Arena game mechanic, and after reading how strapped they were for game size on those old 3.5-inch floppy disks for Arena back in 1994, I think that this was purely to save space. However, the same issue exists for Daggerfall. It is not possible to clear a dungeon or leave anything in them and expect to get them later, because as soon as you go back inside, it is wiped clean and fully populated again like you never entered it. Sometimes with a different population. Honestly, this always irked me for RPGs. It's too gamey and not realistic at all. I am glad this changed for later Elder Scrolls games, even though eventually I believe that all dungeons will respawn their monsters. I know this is the case for Oblivion and Skyrim, but after looking up this issue about Morrowind, it seems that some do respawn, but not until after 72 in-game hours. One game mechanic that I do appreciate in Daggerfall very much is having snow during the winter months, and the snow gone at some point in the spring. The game starts on the 4th of Morningstar, which is the last month of winter. This is another difference between Daggerfall and the others. Daggerfall is the only one to start at this time, where the other games always begin in the equivalent month of August, which is Last Seed. However, in the Elder Scrolls lore, while there may be 12 months, their first month would be like our February in terms of weather in the Northern Hemisphere here on Earth. So Last Seed is the start of their fall, so it's more like September. Despite there being a variety of different weather in the subsequent Elder Scrolls games, the seasons never actually change like they do in Daggerfall. So when I saw the snow go away in the spring only to return later in the year, I was impressed. Yes, it's minor, but great for immersion, and for an avid role player like myself, I do appreciate the little things. There are also phases of the moon, which has real in-game effects. Having the moons affect the game is, as far as I know, something that no other Elder Scrolls game has. The only other thing that I know of in connection to Master and Secunda is that the Khajiits use their position to determine what their offspring will be, as what type of breed they are depends on the moon's positions. So between that and the Void Nights, where the 2 moons were gone for 2 years, it seems to be a purely lore thing. But not in Daggerfall. Every 32 days, there is a full moon, especially relevant for shapeshifters since they will turn into their were form and will stay in that form until midnight of the next day. Hence, a lunar transition is every 8 days, which is interesting if this effect is used when enchanting items. It must be noted that there are 2 moons affecting the game. They are time-shifted by 4 days. That means 4 days after a full moon, there is a second full moon, since Nirn has 2 full moons, Master and Secunda. The first full moons in the game are on the 21st and 25th of Morningstar 3rd Era 405. The next one is on the 23rd and 27th of Sun's Dawn 3rd Era 405, and so on. Again, back to the 2D and 3D character mechanic. My guess is that at the time that Daggerfall came out, the 3D characters was sort of a newish thing. Enemies that you fight are 3D, but the characters to only speak with are still 2D. So even if you were to go on a rampage in a room with both, you can only harm the 3D ones. The 2D characters always face towards you and never fight. You cannot even hit them. Yes, I tried. Of course, this needn't be said by any of the other games since everything went to 3D after Daggerfall, and everyone can be attacked and will fight back. There are many holidays in the game of Daggerfall, as you can see. Some for all the provinces, but many are regional. These tend to be minor things in the games, such as all warriors and knights get to sleep in an inn free for a city I was hanging around for a while. Minor, but they do add to the ambience of the game. I don't recall a single holiday in Morrowind, and just one for Oblivion, which was the New Life Festival. I showed this in one of my Let's Roleplay videos for Oblivion. Then there was the burning of King Olaf in Skyrim, but that doesn't happen on an actual day. That happens when you complete the quest requirements. Based on the average values for starting skills, the typical maximum level for a player who does not use exploits to bypass skill caps will be level 29 or 30. If you are extremely patient and plan very carefully, you can achieve a maximum level of 32. In order to do so, you must restart the process of character creation repeatedly in order to re-roll your skill values until all of your primary, major, and minor skills start at or very close to their minimum possible values of 28, 18, and 13. Respectively, then distribute your bonus skills points evenly across your major and minor skills to keep their totals low. Obviously, most of us wouldn't be comfortable with this limitation in the game. Accordingly, my character Elan would be around 1/3 the maximum level. However, it does do away with the idea that everything is super easy once you get past level 20 in Morrowind, which I'm also not a fan of. Nor do I like the level scaling problem in Oblivion. I don't think anyone does. I think all of the games, when it comes to leveling your character and enemy difficulty, Skyrim tops the list for the most logical progression, while still keeping it difficult. Yes, game difficulty can be changed, but I am referring to the normal level difficulty here, which is Adept in Skyrim. After patch 1.9 for Skyrim, there is no level cap anymore, especially with making skills legendary. Banks are in Daggerfall, and that's not something the subsequent games have at all. Why do you need a bank? Well, let's see, there are various banking transactions you can make. Account. Unlike subsequent Elder Scrolls games, gold in Daggerfall is not weightless. 400 gold pieces have a weight of 1 kilogram. Therefore, the amount of gold you can carry at one time is limited by your strength, and it is necessary to periodically visit a bank to deposit what you have accumulated during your adventures. An account is free, but banks from different regions are not connected with each other. For example, you cannot access your account with the Bank of Daggerfall when you are in Sentinel. And no, you can't just put your gold in your cart either. Letter of credit. If you want to transfer gold from one region to another, or if you need more gold than you can carry, you need to obtain a letter of credit. The letter's value is defined when it is certified at a bank. The administrative charge for certification is equal to 1% of the letter's value. Therefore, if you request a 100,000 gold letter, 101,000 gold will be deducted from your bank account. A letter of credit weighs only 0.25 kilograms, is automatically reduced in value by the appropriate amount when used for purchases, and is accepted as a means of payment in most situations. Some services, such as taverns, will only accept gold. Loan. You can borrow up to 1.1 million gold from a bank. You can only have one loan from a region's bank at any time. The loan must be paid back within a year, 360 days, with 10% interest. If you do not pay back your debt on time, your reputation in the region may drop by 5 points. After about a month, your reputation will go up 1 point, but will not improve further until you do something to improve your regional reputation. In addition, you cannot get a new loan until you pay back the old one. Note, in-game text indicates that if you do not pay your debts on time, you will be pursued by headhunters sent by the bank. However, this does not appear to be the case. Buy, sell house. In every town or city there is a bank. You can purchase one of the many available houses. The cost of buying a house is extremely high, with the cheapest homes costing over 300,000 gold. If you own a house, you can sell it back to the bank at a significantly reduced price. Houses acquired through nightly order quests can also be sold. Only one home may be owned at a time. Buy, sell, ship. If the bank is located at a seaport, you may also purchase a ship. 2 types of ships are sold. The smaller variety costs 100,000 gold, while the larger variety costs 200,000 gold. A ship can be sold back to any bank, even in cities that are not seaports, for a lower price. Only one ship may be owned at a time. In Daggerfall, you may have one of each of the following 7 armor pieces equipped at a time. Helm, head armor. Right pauldron, shoulder and arm covering for the right arm. Left pauldron, shoulder and arm covering for the left arm. Cuirass, chest armor. This may be crafted of padded leather, chainmail, or metal plate. Gauntlets, hand coverings. These function as a single set for both hands. Greaves, leg armor. These function as a single set for both legs. Boots, protective footwear. These function as a single set for both feet. There are also 4 types of shields. A buckler, a small shield that straps to the arm. Round shield, larger than a buckler. Kite shield, a large shield that tapers to a point. Tower shield, the largest and most protective type of shield. Each of the 7 areas of the player's body, head, right arm, left arm, chest, hands, legs, and feet, can only be protected by one armor piece at a time. Each armor piece is assigned an armor rating, which is factored into the chance for an opponent to hit the player with a physical attack. The higher the armor rating, the lower the chance to be hit. Upon each physical attack made against the player, the game selects one of the player's 7 body areas, with the chest and hands most likely to be selected at a 4 out of 20 chance for each, followed by the right arm, left arm, and legs at a 3 out of 20 chance each, the head at a 2 out of 20 chance, and the feet at a 1 out of 20 chance. The game then computes the chance for the player to be successfully hit in consideration of the armor rating of any armor piece currently equipped over the selected body area. Armor pieces crafted of higher grade materials have higher armor ratings than the same pieces crafted of lower grade material. So it seems to me that the logical thing to do is to wear as heavy armor as you can, even as a stealthy character or mage, but heavily armored battle mages aren't unusual in the Elder Scrolls. Clothing can be worn under the armor. I'm not sure about a pair of pants, but I assume that to be true. I can wear a shirt, formal cloak, with a hood, and something that is called a Khajiit suit under it all, sort of like a full underwear outfit. I guess it's cold up in High Rock. These items can be enchanted to further help out your character. As you can see, I had a magically enchanted shirt. Morrowind brought in armor and a block skill. Now there is light, medium, and heavy armor and a skill for each, even though the shields are one of those armor ratings as well. To block with them, you use the block skill. You have 7 parts to cover in armor, including a shield. There are still the left and right pauldrons, so essentially all the armor slots are still there. Clothing has been brought over to Morrowind, but not as much as it was in Daggerfall. You can have a shirt and pants under your armor, as well as a cloak that actually fits over your armor. I didn't even know you could do that with a cloak until looking it up just now, and missed that in my Morrowind Let's Roleplay. Again, enchant all of these pieces of clothing to help your character be even more powerful. Which means barely anything was really lost here except a few items of clothing from Daggerfall in Morrowind, but this time there is a separate skill for the different armor weights, light, medium, and heavy, as well as one for a shield. For Oblivion, clothing has been removed completely from the slots unless you don't want to wear any armor. You can still wear clothing, but only one item can fit in the slot, so no more clothing under or over the armor. They reduced the number of armor items parts required to wear a full protective suit as well, so now it's just a tunic, greaves which are leggings, gloves, boots, and helm, and then a shield if you want. Bethesda removed medium armor from the game, which, wasn't something I like either, but it's not the end of the world. I really liked adamantine medium armor in Morrowind. Skyrim further reduced the amount of slots for armor. Now there are 4 slots, down from 7 in Daggerfall and Morrowind, and 5 in Oblivion. Your tunic, boots, helm, and gloves. And no clothing wasn't added back in either. And there is only heavy and light armor still. Pauldrons were merged into a tunic in Oblivion, and a tunic and greaves are merged into one for Skyrim. Jewelry is a class of items that can be equipped by the character. They have their own section on the inventory user interface and do not appear on the character model when equipped. Their primary purpose is to be enchanted, as they provide no benefit on their own. There are 6 types of jewelry, and the character can equip up to 2 of each. The different types of jewelry are amulets, bracelets, rings, bracers, marks, crystals. I have no idea how those last 2 work in the game. I don't think that I need to go into depth about jewelry in the other games. Daggerfall obviously has a lot more spaces and items to fill than any of them. In Morrowind you get to wear 1 amulet and 2 rings, same with Oblivion, but in Skyrim it was cut down to 1 bracelet and 1 ring for some reason. I did pick up several non-enchanted bracelets in Daggerfall, but no enchanted jewelry of any kind yet. Reputation is the most important influencing factor in the game. Your reputation determines which people will talk to you, which quests you can get from a faction, influence, goods and services, transactions, and if your skills are high enough, whether you can receive a promotion within the factions you have joined. The reputation you can have with a faction or person can vary from -100 to 100, and starts for most factions and people at 0 at the beginning of a new game. Your reputation can only be affected by doing quests. The outcome of a quest determines the gain or loss of reputation with the faction you got the quest from, as well as the effects on reputation with other factions. Many factions are aligned with a number of other factions, and they can have allies as well as enemies. In such cases, your reputation gain or loss with the faction has an immediate influence on the reputation with the associates and its allies and enemies. Temples provide an exception to the rule. It is possible to increase your reputation with a specific deity by giving large donations. A donation of 2,000 gold will increase your reputation by 1 point. 4,000 gold gains 2 points of reputation, and so on. This method, however, works only for the deity of the temple. Your reputation with the temple itself and its associates will not be changed. Most quests give 5 reputation points to the faction if completed successfully, while a few provide 10 points. The reputation gain with the faction's associates and allies, or the loss with its enemies, is half the reputation you get with the quest-giving faction. Numbers are rounded down, so if you get 5 reputation points with the faction, you only gain 2 points with its associates and allies and lose 2 points with its enemies. A failed quest results in the loss of 2 reputation points with the faction and 1 point with its associates and allies. An enemy faction will gain 1 point of reputation. In addition, the reputation of your character with any faction or person, positive or negative, will move 1 point closer to 0 every 112 days, with this 1 point change tracked separately from any reputation changes resulting from successful or failed quests completed for the faction during that period. In the case of joinable factions, example guilds, including knightly orders, the Fighters Guild and Mages Guild, etc., you will not be demoted below your current rank if your faction reputation drops below the minimum threshold for that rank, or even if your faction reputation drops to 0. However, if your faction reputation drops below 0, example by failing quests assigned by the faction or by participating in quests that damage your reputation with the faction, you will be expelled from the faction. After expulsion, if your rank reputation returns to at least 0, you may then rejoin the faction at rank 0. Some quests add or remove additional reputation to certain faction or person, dependent on the direction in which the quest moves. For example, quests for nobles often interfere with affairs of the Thieves Guild, so if you complete the quest for the noble successfully, you will lose a considerable amount of reputation with the Thieves Guild and its associates and affiliated characters. Such special correlations are mentioned in a quest walkthrough. Many factions and people have allies and enemies. If you gain influence with a faction, you also influence with that faction's allies and lose influence with their enemies. However, you do not gain or lose any influence with any factions allied to the allies. Allies and enemy affiliations are not always static for factions and subgroups. They are generated randomly at the start of a new game. This is likely related to the background you create for your character. Hence, only affiliations that remain unchanged are noted in the wiki. Allies and enemies affiliations also change randomly every new year on the mid of first seed. Gaining influence and rank seems to be the only way to increase your character's standing in a guild. The only way to do this is through randomized quests. There is no actual story for the guilds and no quest line either, just quests that are random and always available. While this makes sense for the games back in the 90s, I cannot say that I like this. It's just all gamey and not my thing. I need a coherent story for every guild I join, or it's just a different name only with a few minor perks from each one. Thankfully, this changed starting with Morrowind. However, I do like the concept of reputation that also raises with allies of that faction and lowers with its enemies. Implementing such a thing could prove problematic in, say, Morrowind. Imagine helping King Helseth with all those quests he offers, but your reputation with the Thieves Guild tanks. Regardless, I think reputation could be something that could also be used to add filler for guilds. Take the companions in Whiterun in Skyrim, for example. Let's say each story quest they gives you 5 reputation, but you require 10 for the next story quest to be offered. Meaning, if they give you random quests to gain more reputation, then that would be something that could add a lot of flavor into the game. It's just a thought. Things don't have to be exactly copied and pasted from previous Elder Scrolls games in the next one, but if it's a well-liked mechanic, why not port it over with changes to make it work in the next game? In Daggerfall, stealth is unaffected by anything but your agility skill, armor, and the target looking your way. The light level doesn't factor into it either, like it does in Oblivion and Skyrim. However, movement does, such as running or moving slow in sneak mode. So your speed and agility along with your stealth skill are how you sneak around. In fact, I hardly knew when I was sneaking and when the monster saw me. When you are seen, the monster moves to attack you, so that's when I know my sneak has failed. In Morrowind, stealth now takes into account if the NPC or monster is looking your way, and your footwear, which is unmodded Morrowind. only working for clothing, not armor. This and stealth is based upon agility and luck, as well as some other minor things, such as the NPC stamina level. For Oblivion, they really upped their stealth mechanics to be much more realistic. I remember reading that they brought in someone that worked on the old Thief games way back in the early 2000s, who used his expertise to vastly improve the stealth mechanics of Oblivion. Now you can tell if you're seen or not. When in sneak mode, pay careful attention to the eye in the center of the screen. If the eye lights up, that means somewhere an NPC or creature knows you're there. Never steal, pick locks, pick pockets, etc. when the eye is lit. Reposition yourself so that the eye goes dim and you can do your dirty work in 100% safety. It's really that simple. No matter how many NPCs are standing around, how bright it is, how close they are, just watch the eye. However, the eye lights up even if an ally, your horse, or your summoned creature sees you. The amount of light that hits your character does matter, so always try and stay in the shadows and unequip any equipped torches. Until you become an expert, walking will make you easier to detect than standing still, and running will make detecting you even easier. The weight of your shoes has an effect until you become a journeyman, so take off those 9-pound iron boots if you're going to sneak, as barefoot makes the least noise. You can assign your boots to a hotkey if you want to be able to quickly put them back on. Actions like picking a lock or picking up items, the heavier the item the more so, increase your chance of being detected. Visibility and chameleon decrease the chances of being seen. Sneak mode complements these spells by also decreasing the chance that you will be heard. Invisibility is 100% effective, but prevents you from doing anything other than moving. The spell is cancelled as soon as you attack or use the activate button. Being a battle mage in Oblivion, my character Malcolm used invisibility along with his great sneak skills to so far be the best thief in any of my Elder Scrolls characters in all my Let's Roleplays, even though Torald is an actual thief in Skyrim. He'll become a great one day, but he's not there yet. Invisibility may help. Your climbing skill is automatically and continually checked whenever you attempt to scale any surface. If you slip, your climbing skill is again checked as you attempt to regain a handhold. Cat burglars and dungeon delvers should invest time into developing this skill. Climbing's governing attribute is strength. Unfortunately, only Daggerfall had climbing in it, which is another major removal of a game mechanic from Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim. However, it's not that major, or even something that for me is greatly missed. It's neat, I'll give it that, but instrumental to doing much of anything in the game? Well, some dungeons are built around having you climb, but other than that, not that much. No, I'm not advocating removing of mechanics like this in the games. I dislike that it was done. I think this should have stayed in, but I don't know the reason for it. Perhaps it was too frustrating for people who didn't practice using climb, or perhaps it got in the way of planning out dungeons or buildings that you weren't supposed to be able to climb in Morrowind. However, climbing wasn't actually removed in Morrowind, it was combined into your acrobatic skill, and though you can no longer climb vertical walls, you can still climb steep hills. The higher your acrobatic skill, the steeper hill you can climb. See, I wasn't even aware of this until looking it up right now. Like levitation removal in Oblivion from Morrowind, there are logical reasons why mechanics like this was removed. A quick internet search did give me this on levitation being removed in Oblivion. In Oblivion, levitation spells have been removed. The reason levitation was removed, according to the developers, is that, unlike in Morrowind, cities are located in separate cells from the rest of the world. Since the cities aren't fully rendered until you enter them, it wouldn't look right if you were to fly over the walls. Levitation also was sometimes used as an exploit in previous games of the series, so it was removed to preserve game balance. However, by climbing on rooftops, you can in fact exit towns and see the unrendered world. You can see right here that levitation is in Daggerfall, though I haven't ever used it. It also says at the bottom that climbing and levitation cannot be used together? Interesting. Well, that kind of sucks, so I guess you wouldn't be able to do this. Maybe in a future Elder Scrolls game. A crime is an act that breaks the law, which, if caught committing, will incur the wrath of the city guard. The agent has the option to either turn themselves in and go before the court or resist arrest. Trial. If the player chooses to surrender, they will be brought before a judge who will read off their crime and the potential punishment, fines, jail time, and have the opportunity to plead their case. A guilty plea will result in a lesser sentence being imposed and being released outside of town. A not guilty plea will offer the player the choice of lying to get out of the charge or debating the merits of the case. A lie response will involve a streetwise skill check, whereas a debate response will involve a check against the etiquette skill. Both are modified by the player's reputation and/or rank within the Thieves Guild or Dark Brotherhood, if applicable. If found not guilty, the player is released outside of town, sans fine or jail time. However, their reputation in the eyes of the law will remain unchanged and will only slowly improve over time. Players found guilty must pay the fine, or as much of the fine as they have the gold to pay for it, and serve their jail time. The time served doesn't negatively impact skills or experience, as it does in later games, but will likely cause the agent to fail any timed quests they may have. On top of all that, I was once banned from ever going back into a major city. I don't even remember what crime I committed that got me that. Of course I reloaded. Otherwise, you'd never be able to progress the main quest. Going to trial is one of the biggest and most glaring things that were removed for subsequent Elder Scrolls games, in my opinion. It's not even that much of a time-consuming mechanic to create for Bethesda, but without it, it just doesn't make much sense. Other than Daggerfall, if you commit a crime, you get a bounty, and if it's past a small threshold for the guards to come, you either pay it off, fight, or surrender to them. Surrendering gets you jail time, and you can lose random skill points depending on how long your sentence is. In all games, though, paying off bounties are reduced in price, typically half, if you are part of the Thieves Guild. If you have a sizable bounty, you can do what I like to do in Morrowind, run from them to the Thieves Guild and pay off the bounty at half the price. Traditionally, 3 options for resolving a bounty exist across games: paying the bounty off in gold, resisting arrest, or serving in prison. Skyrim introduces 2 more options: evading bounty by flaunting a title. Jarls of Skyrim can grant the title of Thane to citizens, which allows the individual's menial crimes to be overlooked. Crimes such as murder or assault may not be overlooked. However, it should be noted that evasion of a bounty via Thanehood can only be used once per hold unless the Dragonborn is elected Thane again by a new Jarl following the Civil War questline. The 5th and last option for the Dragonborn, assuming they are part of the Thieves Guild, is to pay more septims, bribing the guard, but retain stolen goods. It is also possible, if one's speech is sufficient, to simply talk the guard out of apprehending the Dragonborn.
We're here to teach you a lesson.
On top of that, Skyrim has hired thugs. Hired thugs are hostile characters which can appear in any random event location. This is only supposed to occur after the Dragonborn has stolen goods from a character, repeatedly trespassed, assaulted someone, or murdered someone. Some characters, such as Bellathor, may consider knocking over items or using a shout inside their shop as sufficient reason. This event can occur even if the Dragonborn employed stealth or remained undetected throughout the incident in question. One of the thugs sent after the Dragonborn will carry a contract signed by the offending party. Anyone can hire thugs, merchants, townsfolk, jarls, town guards, who will sign the contract with Whiterun Guard, for example, and even children or dogs. In addition to children and dogs, Parthenax may send hired thugs after the Dragonborn should they steal from the Greybeards. It is also possible for Forsworn, Briarhearts, and Bandits to send hired thugs if items are pickpocketed from them. The contract in these cases will be signed with the generic character's name. If the person who took out the contract is dead, the thugs will still appear. A hired thug may put out a contract if they have been successfully pickpocketed too. Even the ghosts at the abandoned prison may hire thugs, in which case the contract will be signed Ghost. While the contracts say that they do not necessarily have to kill the Dragonborn, only teach them a lesson, they will always attempt to kill the player, regardless of whether or not they resist. The thugs are exclusively melee fighters in groups of 3 and wear heavy armor. A hired thug can occasionally incur a bounty on themselves when attacking the Dragonborn, resulting in nearby guards attacking them. However, the reverse can also be true. Hold guards and witnesses may register the player's self-defense as an assault, and bounties will be added accordingly. Skyrim also introduces the Bounty Collector. A Bounty Collector is a high-level guard who will intercept the Dragonborn on the roads of Skyrim should a crime or series of crimes carry a bounty exceeding 1,000 gold within a particular hold. Unlike normal guards who can only pursue criminals in a certain hold, bounty collectors ignore the distinction between holds and have jurisdiction anywhere in Skyrim, regardless of the hold in which the bounty is incurred. Like the hired thugs, they are statistically equivalent to a bandit chief, and as such come equipped with a leveled suit of heavy armor and often an enchanted weapon. Therefore, under no circumstances whatsoever should they be underestimated. They will approach and demand that the player pay the bounty. If the Dragonborn cannot or will not pay for whatever reason, the bounty collector automatically becomes hostile and attacks. The total amount which the Dragonborn must pay is, however, much the bounty was, as well as an extra 20% to cover the administrative expenses. Alright, aside from the few bugs where ghosts or dogs can hire thugs to come after you, I do believe that Skyrim expanded upon crime in a better direction. There's still no trial, but it's still better than what was in Morrowind and Oblivion. It's just that facing a judge at trial should also have remained in as a mechanic throughout the series. It's a fun little minigame that is both realistic, tests your skills, it's enjoyable, and immersive. Why it was removed is beyond me. One special feature in Daggerfall is the ability for the player to create their own spells using the game's spell creation system, which is unlocked by joining the Mages Guild, allowing the player to create custom spells with varying effects. The game will automatically generate the magicka costs of the spell based on the power of effects chosen. Similar to the spell creation is the ability to enchant equipment. I'd have loved to have done this, but unfortunately I wasn't allowed to join the Mages Guild until I had a higher skill level in one of the spell schools. I was, however, working on it. In Morrowind and Oblivion you can do the same thing and not much change there, though as to the minute details of how they differ isn't really that important. However, spell creation was removed in Skyrim, and this I would have loved to have had in my favorite game. Doing some research, there is a quote from Todd Howard about it. Yeah, spellcrafting is a real wild card, something that we've done a lot, and there are pluses and minuses to it. We'd like to find We have some ideas that we really like on how to solve that, and I don't know where that's going to go. But the thing that we don't like about the previous systems that we've done is it becomes very spreadsheety. It takes the magic out of magic. Some people believe it was done for balance reasons. I do remember reading how broken spellmaking could be in Oblivion quite a few years ago now, even with the old level scaling issue still in the game. Apparently you can craft a spell that takes the target's resistance to 0, as well as then giving them a damage over time effect, which could kill them fairly quickly no matter what level they were, and it made the game trivially easy. If anything, I think Bethesda was trying to avoid this. However, there are ways to do it so that overpowered spells are either very magicka costly or are just not allowed. At the least, nerfing your ability to kill things with magic trivially should have been the goal. I did spellmaking in Oblivion and a little in Morrowind in my Let's Roleplays. For Malcolm, my Oblivion Battle Mage, I crafted something of the like, with one effect of the spell being to reduce resistance. I didn't make the resistance removal effect overly powerful, and neither was the damage effect of the spell. It just seemed like a helpful spell, but my enemies still took quite a while to bring down, and it was magicka costly.
Enchantment? Enchantment!
Besides creating your own spells, being part of the Mages Guild or the Temple of Julianos has another benefit. Characters must be at least 5th rank, Enchanter or higher, in the Mages Guild or the Temple of Julianos to access the Item Maker. Find the person with the Make Magic Items option and talk with him. The process is very simple. Choose an item you wish to enchant, add the appropriate effects, and pay the fee. You may choose a total of 10 advantages or disadvantages. The cost of the item is 10 gold pieces per enchantment point of the effects you choose, plus any additional costs for certain advantages or disadvantages. Advantages provide benefits to the user of the item. Disadvantages hinder the carrier of the item, but will increase the number of available enchantment points for the item. This sounds like something every high-level adventurer in Daggerfall should make use of. Having all those items you wear, both jewelry and clothing, as well as your armor and weapons, could make you a very powerful character. Yes, enchantment is in Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim. In Morrowind and Oblivion, they seem to work in a similar way to how it is in Daggerfall. Enchantment can make your character even more powerful, especially in Skyrim, where you can double enchant items with a maxed out skill and picking the final perk in the perk tree. This allows you to place on a non-enchanted item 2 high-level enchantments. This does seem awfully powerful, and that is what my goal is in Skyrim each time I play through. The enchantment mechanic in Skyrim is why I like enchanting at all. Although it's obviously beneficial to everyone, even in the other games. To enchant, you need a soul gem and a soul trap spell. Soul trap can also be created as an enchantment in all 4 games to be applied upon a weapon. The more powerful the enemy, and the larger the soul gem, the better the trap soul. The soul trap spell or enchantment has a certain duration depending on its effect, so make sure you kill them before it wears off. Filled soul gems can also be used to charge your weapons. In Morrowind, enchantment is now a skill, and you can either pay an enchanter to enchant your items like in Daggerfall, or you can do it yourself, and the outcome depends on several attributes: skill, item, and level of soul in a soul gem. If you pay for it, expect to spend a lot for high-level enchantments, but if you do it yourself, it depends upon your enchantment skill as well as your intelligence and luck. They remove the skill in Oblivion, and instead you go to enchant items at an altar of enchantment in only 3 places within the game. 2 within the Arcane University and 1 in Frostcrag Spire. It works in a similar way to how it was in the previous games. This time, however, you can use sigil stones that you collect when you close Oblivion gates, which can be used on any non-enchanted item at any time in your inventory. The sigil stones seem to be a randomized enchantment ready to put on your equipment. Also, you can get Varla stones within these old Ayleid ruins, though they are rare in the game. These can fully recharge any weapon, so hold on to them. You can also apply more than one effect on your weapons in a single enchantment, though for all items in all 4 games, only non-enchanted items can be enchanted. In Skyrim, enchanting is one of my favorite skills. Unlike the previous games, it doesn't go by what spells you know, but by what magical items you have disenchanted in your playthrough. Your character will only be able to use these enchantments for future enchantments, so you seem to have a list of them that you remember for the future. To do any enchanting, you need to go to an arcane enchanter. Sigil stones are not in Skyrim, and you cannot pay anyone to do it for you either, like it is in Morrowind. In Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim, once applied, the enchantments all seem to work the same. For weapons, the enchantment uses an effect upon your target, which depending on its power uses up a certain charge. This is where soul gems can be used to charge your weapon. You can also get your weapon recharged in Oblivion by certain merchants. One thing of note, you cannot soul trap humans and elves in Morrowind, but can in Daggerfall. In Oblivion and Skyrim, you require what is called a black soul gem. Black soul gems tend to hold the highest souls, just like a grand soul gem can, but grand soul gems cannot hold those souls of humans and elves, and black soul gems are quite rare. The final word on enchantment in Daggerfall is that there is no way to recharge your items or repair any enchanted item. Since there is a durability to all equipment, eventually the enchanted piece of equipment will break and then disappear. Again, I am not sure if the latest versions of Daggerfall Unity have fixed this, but because of this, enchantment doesn't seem to be as good as it is in the other Elder Scrolls games. Unfortunately, I never made any potions in Daggerfall, and I couldn't find any that focused on it either, so an alchemy lab from Skyrim will have to do. Potions are necessary and vital items for survival in Daggerfall. Sometimes potions can be taken from fallen enemies or found as loot. However, they are most readily available for purchase from one of many temples in the Iliac Bay or from the Dark Brotherhood. You can also make these potions yourself with the help of a potion maker at a temple or with the Dark Brotherhood. Unlike subsequent Elder Scrolls games, alchemists do not sell potions, nor will they buy them. Note, in Daggerfall Unity, all potions with the chance component will set it at 100%, making it impossible for a potion to fail. Well, that makes me think it used to be able to fail with your potions. or at least when you drink them they only had a certain percentage of actually working. Ingredients for alchemy cannot be picked up out in the wilderness, only from corpses or bought or stolen from stores. So again, Morrowind had something in it that Daggerfall did not, because finding ingredients among flowers and plants is a staple of alchemy in Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim. In Daggerfall, if you are poisoned or given a disease, you are only told you feel somewhat bad in a text. A poison can be lethal really fast. I think I've always had to reload when I get hit with one. Unfortunately, it only works for NPCs against you, and you cannot poison enemies. I may have survived an attack or two by poison, and it may have worn off, but being poisoned and in a melee fight can kill you in a matter of seconds. You can cure poison by using a potion or a restoration spell. The same thing is in Morrowind. However, there are no poisons that you apply to your weapons in Morrowind. Instead, the only poison comes from spells. In Oblivion and Skyrim, you can apply a poison potion to your melee weapons or ranged weapons like an arrow, which I like to do often if you watch my videos. Not being able to poison enemies in Daggerfall is another thing you couldn't do, which could be done in the later games. For Daggerfall, there are quite a few factions to join in the game. There are 6 categories of factions you can join. Each faction offers random quests ranging from menial courier duties to killing giants and liches. Most factions will offer quests to all adventurers, although in most cases such quests will not provide a reward other than improving your reputation with the faction. To take advantage of a faction's special benefits, better rewards, and harder quests, you must join the faction. Knightly Orders. Valiant Knights look no further for a lord. You can only be a member of one Knightly Order faction at any time. Fighters Guild. The Imperial Mercenaries Guild. Mages Guild. Spellcasters and scholars alike will enjoy the benefits of the Mages Guild. Thieves Guild. Sneaky sorts reside in this guild. Dark Brotherhood. The Assassins Guild led by the Night Mother. Temples. Temples devoted to the 8 divines of Tamriel. You can only be a member of one temple faction at a time. 10 knightly orders and 8 temples, not one to tell us either. Nords should be unimpressed, alright. This many factions greatly drops in Morrowind, which has only one of 3 great houses, 8 actual guild types you can choose to join or not, including the vampires. There are 3 factions you have to join to complete the main quest, which is the Blades, of course you don't have a choice, one of the great houses, and the East Empire Company in Bloodmoon. Instead of joining the Dark Brotherhood, you can choose to join the Morag Tong. In Oblivion, there were actually more guilds than the standard fighter, mage, thief, assassin ones to join than I had thought, but for the most part in all Elder Scrolls games that is the norm. Oblivion does introduce the Arena faction to join, which I always enjoyed playing through. No great houses are there to join like it was in Morrowind though. The Knights of the Nine is another faction that is added through DLC, but I don't think it's necessary to list guilds you join which have no quests. Not that I'm talking about the Knights of the Nine, but there are many that don't. The game does force you to join the Blades, again. There are small guilds throughout the game that you can sort of be an honorary member of, though. Membership is typically obtained as a reward for completing a quest. Most of these guilds offer some sort of benefit, but no additional quests. The same standard 4 factions appear in Skyrim, however this time you can join into one of 2 warring sides in the Civil War, sort of like the Great Houses in Morrowind. This choice will decide who wins if you play all the quests to conclusion. The names of the guilds change somewhat, Companions for the Fighters Guild, the College of Winterhold for the Mages Guild, but the Dark Brotherhood and the Thieves Guild names are still there. In all but Daggerfall, you have to join the Blades to play through the main story. Apparently the Blades didn't exist until around the time of Morrowind, but by lore they were there to assist Tiber Septim at the very end of the Second Era. Training services are offered by most joinable factions in Daggerfall. They allow you to increase your proficiency in a particular skill outside of normal use, up to a maximum proficiency of 51%. A single session is roughly equal to 15 uses of the skill being trained, which means the skill is not guaranteed to increase to the next level, though it often will. A training session lasts for 3 hours and consumes 30 fatigue points. If you have less than 31 fatigue points, you will drop to the floor from exhaustion upon completing the session and awaken 1 hour later. You can only train once every 12 hours, but this requirement can be deceptive. The 3 hours spent during the session count as a part of the cooldown, so you only must wait an additional 9 hours before you are able to receive further training. All trainers share this cooldown. For example, training at the Fighters Guild will also prevent training at the Mages Guild until enough time has passed. The costs for a training session are 100 gold times the player's current level. Training is normally only available to members of a particular faction. The exceptions to this rule are the temples, who will train non-members. However, in this case, the costs per session are 400 gold times the player's current level. Training for Morrowind. All training requires that a fee be paid. Gold is automatically subtracted from the inventory when a training session is accepted. The cost per level of training varies on 3 primary factors: personality, disposition, and current level in the skill being trained. The cost of training increases with each level of skill trained. Trainers that are also merchants will add gold paid to them for training to their available gold amount only if their barter is accessed prior to training. In this manner, it is possible to pay for training then sell them items to recover the gold spent. There is no cap on how often a skill can be trained in this manner. Skills can be trained often as the player wishes, assuming they have found a trainer of adequate level, as all trainers have a maximum level to which they can increase a skill. Once the skill is equal to the trainers, then no further training is available from them, although the skill will still be listed with a price in the training menu. Training in Oblivion. Trainers increase certain skills in exchange for gold. Training can be used 5 times per level only. Training a skill in this way costs 10 times the current skill level. Example, raising a skill from 24 to 25 costs 240 gold. Note that current skill level for the purpose of the payment is calculated after modifiers. Example, from enchanted armor. Therefore, it is cheaper if skill boosting gear is unequipped before entering a training session. Training in Skyrim. One of the big differences is how money is saved on that person. Now you can pickpocket trainers for your money back. Also, unlike Morrowind and Oblivion, trainers in Skyrim only offer skill leveling from Adept upwards, which means the trainer has a minimum of 50 skill that they can train you up to. In previous games, trainers offered apprentice level and novice level training. There are skill trainers in Skyrim labeled as common trainers. This is incorrectly labeled, as the trainers offer their services up to the Adept level. Unlike Morrowind and Oblivion, there are no means to be trained all the way up to level 100 in a skill. The 3 trainer levels are Adept 50 skill, Expert 75 skill, and Master 90 skill. Now we come to time throughout the entire Elder Scrolls series. All 4 of the games have a day and night cycle, and they all have a time of day, days of the week, days of the month, and 12 months out of the year. The days of the week and the months are named something unique for the Elder Scrolls. However, there is a gap between Daggerfall and Oblivion. The gap I am referring to is that despite the time of day, everyone in Morrowind remained either static, standing in place unless attacked, or wandered aimlessly around a set area. Time didn't seem to matter to anyone or anything. Being that Morrowind was my first Elder Scrolls game, I didn't really pay too much attention to that, especially considering nearly every RPG I've played before did the same thing. But they did have NPCs in Daggerfall adhere to a day and night cycle. You see commoners out during the daylight hours and gone when it was night. In fact, at night you may even get attacked in the city streets by thieves. Shops open and close during certain daytime hours, though inns are always open. I do not recall thieves attacking you at night in a city in any other Elder Scrolls game, but at least in Oblivion, Bethesda really focused on NPC behavior and brought back a realistic time for NPCs to be out working or whatever they're up to during the day and sleeping at night. In Daggerfall, stores have a set hour to be open, usually between 8 AM and 8 PM, but it can vary by a few hours. Nighttime is the best time to break into shops and rob them to your heart's content. I'll give Oblivion and Skyrim a bit more credit in that you actually see the owner sleeping in a bed, unlike Daggerfall, who just disappear and then reappear when the store is open, or Morrowind, where the static merchants are open an unrealistic 24 hours a day. But other than that, the days tend to have a lot of meaning in Daggerfall, in that almost every quest comes with a day count that they have to be completed by. That time limit also includes when you get the item or fulfill the task and return to the NPC quest giver. Personally, I never had an issue with this. The quest time limits tended to be generous. It was just another game mechanic that I had to get used to. Daggerfall also has different modes for you as the player to interact with the game world. These are Steal, Grab, Info, and Dialogue. In Daggerfall Unity, these can be switched through by using the F1 to F4 keys. Steal mode allows you to make pickpocketing attempts against NPCs and enemies, and lockpicking attempts against non-magically locked doors. Do not be in this mode when you are just trying to talk to somebody or the guards will come. Grab mode allows you to open unlocked doors, climb ladders, operate switches, and search treasure piles or corpses for loot. You can also speak to friendly NPCs while in grab mode. Clicking in info mode will display a description of the object being clicked. This includes the names of NPCs and buildings, treasure piles, doors, lock status, etc. Additionally, opening certain doors in some locations while in info mode will display a short summary of the room within. Dialogue mode allows you to speak to NPCs without fear of accidentally attempting to pickpocket them. This mode allows for looting treasure, piles, and corpses. When in settlements, I'd stick to this safe mode unless otherwise needed. No other Elder Scrolls games that I am comparing Daggerfall to here have different modes. Items lose what is called condition in Daggerfall from use. Decay, loss of durability, whatever they call it, information on this wasn't exactly easy to come by, not on the Elder Scrolls fandom wiki or on the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages, and I had to catch snippets from other sites talking about it for some reason. I've already discussed what happens to magically enchanted equipment in Daggerfall, but I also saw that only weapons will break and disappear on another site, so it isn't exactly clear how it works. I also read about another person going into the save files and fixing up their enchanted weapon durability back to max every now and then. What I do know for sure is that all the items you wear and use do degrade and lose condition. For armor, you need to see an armorsmith to repair them, weaponsmiths won't touch them, and for weapons, a weaponsmith. Can non-enchanted weapons be repaired? I don't know, I haven't been able to try it. As for the original Daggerfall, when you submit an item to be repaired, it could take a day or longer, depending on how expensive the item is and apparently how backed up the merchant is in repairing other items. I believe the option to have it repaired instantly was put into Daggerfall Unity. As for the other three games, well, Skyrim is easy. They remove durability completely. I am of two minds on that. Obviously, it's not realistic, but on the other hand, it does make it a lot simpler to not have to maintain your equipment and carry around hammers to repair them, like it is in Morrowind and Oblivion. I think a middle ground should have happened. I am a big fan of Dungeons & Dragons, and I know that magically enchanted equipment, especially the more epic ones, tend not to degrade or even to take a scratch when used. Why not then apply the same concept to the Elder Scrolls? Just make it really difficult to damage high-level enchanted equipment? Remove the repair skill as it was in Morrowind and Oblivion, yes, which, honestly, carrying around hammers to fix your armor and weapons isn't realistic either. And just take your items to a smith to repair, or, if you are a smith, allow your character to repair them yourself at a forge, work table, or grinding stone. Enchanted items in this rule set I'm proposing would take less loss of durability, and high-level enchantments or Daedric artifacts take the absolute least, and are not easy to degrade even with a ton of combat. Anyway, that's my take on it. For Morrowind and Oblivion, you do need to bring hammers around with you, especially if you get into a lot of combat. Not only will your equipment degrade and break, but they are less effective the lower their durability. I won't forget near the end of my Let's Roleplay of Morrowind, where I was fighting a lot of werewolves in Blood Moon on Solstheim, and when starting the Hunter's game, I had about 20 to 30 hammers, which I thought was sufficient enough. By the time I faced Hircine at the end, much of my equipment had literally broken and fallen apart. Thankfully, I focused use of my last hammers on my weapon in order to defeat the god, but it was fairly close, and it was a bit stressful for me, because if I couldn't do it, well, that is a lot of fixing I'd have to do to my videos, perhaps even backtrack to before where I started the the Great Hunt, and bring 100 hammers with me. I had the best equipment one could have in Morrowind, and I don't think that my character should have had to go through that. Okay, old man rant off. Now we come to the last game mechanic of the series that at least I can think of outside of skills, which is the next part. Lycanthropes and vampires. Now I've already discussed in depth what those two races are, like in Daggerfall, so I think much of it has already been covered. It does seem to me that you can gain a heck of a lot of power for your character by becoming one of those two, though there are some drawbacks, of course. More like new rules you just need to play by. But is it worth it? They do seem awfully powerful, so I think it just might be, at least for Daggerfall. Okay, let's start with lycanthropy in Morrowind, and then Skyrim, since in Oblivion it's not an option. Becoming a werewolf is simple and parallel to becoming a vampire on Vvardenfell. Fight one. It can be either in human or werewolf form, and contract Canis lupinus. Canis lupinus. After waiting for 3 days with this disease, you will become a werewolf. The easiest way to become a werewolf is by progressing through the main quest and not obtaining a cure after being informed that you have the disease during the quest, The Siege of the Skull Village. You can likewise become a werewolf by trying to find one of the elusive wandering werewolves or putting on Hircine's ring, which will give you the same special abilities. Every night, you will have a vision of Hircine, and after that you will be in werewolf form and will have to kill an NPC that night, or you will lose large amounts of health the following morning. While in werewolf form, you will have a permanent detect animal for 4,000 points around you. However, unlike the regular detect animal, this shows only NPCs on the map, seeing as you need to kill an NPC every night to maintain your health. This is quite handy. You will also have 25 points of Night Eye. Your inventory is inaccessible and you cannot interact with anything. No looting, opening, unlocking, talking, etc. Your only weapons when in werewolf form are your claws. They damage health instead of fatigue, despite technically being considered your hands. You also can't use magic. Your attributes and skills are set to the following values, regardless of what they are in normal form. Additionally, your inventory weight is ignored, run speed is increased by 50%, and jumping distance is increased. Normally, no one will know that you are a werewolf, but if you are seen transforming by anyone, even if you kill them immediately afterwards, all of Tamriel will know you are a werewolf and will usually attack you on sight, even during the day. Each morning you will transform back as you were before the transformation, except all of your equipment will be removed. Not sure if it's worth it. If you had enough of being a bloodthirsty lycanthrope every night and want to revert back to normal, all you have to do is obtain and follow the werewolf cure quest, Rite of the Wolf Giver. Solstheim is a good place to live as a werewolf because berserkers and Freis hags make great respawning sacrifices. You can leave your house at 8, an hour before you become a werewolf, and sit around for a while away from anybody that may spot you. When you transform, you can maul a couple of Freis hags or berserkers and then wait until you become human again and resume your normal life. Using any non-instant transport can be tricky because you may transform during the journey. Travel early in the day. As a werewolf, your athletics are increased, so swimming becomes a viable method of travel. Back on Vvardenfell, living as a werewolf is not as tough as it might seem. There are plenty of places to hide and plenty of people to kill, but there are fewer bandits and respawning no-name NPCs. Guards, though, if lured from the safety of their towns, make good victims. Living as both a werewolf and a vampire is tough, as the disadvantages of both add up. Travel and general interaction with people become pretty limited, for instance, and you take sun damage and must kill every night. The stat increases, however, are considerable. Wow, you can be both a werewolf and a vampire at the same time in Morrowind? I'm just learning this as I'm putting it on my screen. Lycanthropy is a condition in Skyrim that gives you the beast form greater power, which allows you to take on the form of a werewolf. Becoming a werewolf adds the beast blood constant effect, which grants a 100% resistance to all diseases, but also prevents you from gaining resting bonuses. Werewolves can deal lethal damage with their claw attacks, move swiftly, and have increased health and stamina. You can become a werewolf by drinking werewolf blood during the companion's questline. In the Dawn Guard add-on, A skill tree is added for werewolves with perks that will increase your damage, health, and stamina as a werewolf, and even enhance your howl abilities. In order to unlock new perks, you must feed on corpses of non-undead NPCs. As a werewolf, you can also draw power from the Totems of Hircine to give your shout-like howl ability new powers, although you may only use the shout related to the particular totem you have activated. The beast form power has the following effects. Your health increases by 50 and stamina increases by 100. With a Dawn Guard added perk, health increases by 150 and stamina by 200. Stamina regeneration increases from 5% of your total stamina per second to 20%. Carrying capacity increases by 2,000 points. Ability to use shout-like howls. Howl of Terror. Enemies flee in fear for 60 seconds and nearby wolves come to your aid. Totem of Brotherhood. Summons 2 Red Pack members to aid you in combat for a limited time. Totem of the Hunt. Reveals nearby prey, similar to a Detect Life spell. Totem of Fear. Grants a higher level Fear Howl. Base unarmed damage increases to 20 points and reach to 150 points. Most races have a base unarmed damage of 4 and a reach of 96. Werewolf Claws, a constant fortify unarmed damage effect that increases with your level and gives you resist damage if Dawn Guard is installed. Base health regeneration is set to 0 unless the Ring of the Hunt is equipped. The first time you transform using beast form, you will immediately be cured of all diseases, including any stage of vampirism. This means you cannot be a vampire and a werewolf at the same time, unlike in Morrowind. The beast form power also automatically removes all of your equipment. Summon thralls, such as dead thralls, will immediately die. However, other summoned creatures will remain until their timer expires. While you are in beast form, you cannot use any of your equipment, spells, dragon shouts, or powers, but your attacks increase in power and speed, and you may execute one of 4 kill cam moves. Pressing a single attack button may have you leaping on your enemy and savagely slashing their chests or biting their throats. Pressing both attack buttons simultaneously may have you throwing your enemy a great distance or lifting them off their feet and decapitating them. Your move speed will increase as well, and you will not be staggered by attacks or by attacking an enemy with a raised shield. Since you cannot use spells or items, the only way to heal yourself is to feed on corpses. Racial abilities do not carry over into your beast form, but existing spell effects do. This includes passive abilities such as the Lord Stone, the Blessing of Mara, and the magic resistance perks from the Alteration skill tree. It also includes the Destruction Cloak spells and the Alteration Flesh spells. However, effects that change health regeneration rates such as the Lady Stone or regenerate health potions will do nothing unless you have equipped the Ring of the Hunt. This is because werewolves that are not wearing this ring have their base health regeneration set to 0, so any effect that multiplies this rate will result in a health regeneration rate of 0. As a werewolf in Skyrim, you will be hated and feared by almost any NPC that sees you in your beast form, and most will attack you on sight. Exceptions include other werewolves, Maik the Liar, members of the Dark Brotherhood, the Circle, followers currently in your service, members of the Thieves Guild, and the heroes of Sovngarde, but not your spouse, unless your spouse is one of these. Your wolf cousins will not attack you, and may even come to your aid if you use your Howl of Terror ability. However, werebearers will attack you on sight. Crimes committed in beast form will not be attributed to you and will not increase your bounty, unless someone sees you transform. If you are seen turning into your beast form, 1,000 gold will be added to your bounty, unless the person is one of those that won't attack you. Yorlin Greymane will publicly defend the Dragonborn if the transformation occurs in Whiterun. You will have a forced third-person view while beast form is active and will not be able to access character menus or maps. If Dawn Guard is installed, opening the character menu will open the werewolf skill tree. You will not be able to pick up any items, pick locks, activate containers, or initiate conversation while in beast form, but you can activate switches such as levers and pull chains. To progress through dungeons, though you will be unable to interact with objects preventing the use of switches, you can command followers by pointing your crosshair at them and holding down your activate use control. Followers cannot be commanded to pick up items while you are in beast form. However, they will interpret any such order as simply move there. You cannot consciously choose to deactivate beast form once you have transformed. The only way to return to your human form is to wait for the beast form to end or to use the wait function. In Skyrim Special Edition, anything you had equipped while transforming is automatically re-equipped. In the original release, you have to re-equip your equipment manually. All hells except for Howl of Terror have to be unlocked via a quest that is available when you have completed the Companion's questline, as long as you remain a werewolf. You can only have one howl active at a time. You can choose which howl you wish to select by visiting the Underforge and praying at the totem that corresponds to the howl you want. Only 3 totems are available. Once you have selected a new howl by praying at a totem, the Howl of Terror becomes permanently unavailable, although the Howl of Fear, which is available from the 3rd totem, is very similar. To cure yourself in the base game, you must complete the Companion's questline. After you have completed Glory of the Dead, you may cure yourself of lycanthropy by returning to Ysgrimmor's tomb, although you will need another Glenmoral Witch's Head. If you need another Glenmoral Witch's Head, you can wait until either Vilcus or Farkas asks for help to be cleansed of lycanthropy, and complete the quest, Purity, which make sure to grab an extra Glenmoral Witch's Head for yourself. Then you can use the Flame of the Harbinger to cure yourself. Once cured, you will no longer have access to the Underforge until the Glory of the Dead quest, and you will not be able to complete the Totems of Hircine quests if you have not already done so. You will also be unable to complete the Dragonborn quest, Visit the Hunters at Frostmoon Crag. The Dawnguard add-on allows you to restore your lycanthropy with help from Aelia the Huntress. You can do this only once. If you cure it again, you cannot regain your lycanthropy from Aelia, since the required dialogue option will no longer be available. However, you may reset this option as many times as desired by using the command reset quest. If you restore your lycanthropy, you will keep all of the werewolf perks you had before and will also keep the same totem benefit that you had active when you were a werewolf previously. Accepting Lord Harkon's gift of vampirism during the Bloodline quest or asking Serana to make you a vampire either during the Chasing Echoes quest or after the end of the Dawnguard questline will also cure you of lycanthropy. Now on to Morrowind vampires. In Morrowind, becoming a vampire will open up 11 new quests and a few unique rewards and challenges. They are sometimes called blood vampires, to distinguish them from the unrelated ash vampires. Vampirism is considered a disease and is contracted from a vampire's bite. Be aware that there is no actual bite and that only melee combat counts. Their spells can't transmit the disease. With each hit, you have a small chance of being infected. A good way to catch the initial condition, porphyric hemophilia, is to repeatedly search the body of a slain vampire. If you are immune to disease, like after having been cured from corpus, you're immune to this as well, unless you cast weakness to common disease on self, preferably of 100-point magnitude. To become a vampire in a particular clan, you do not need to be infected by a vampire that belongs to that clan. You just need to be infected by one that belongs to that bloodline. This means that nameless vampires work just fine. Once you catch porphyric hemophilia, you can cure yourself with any form of cure common disease, including spells, potions, and shrine blessings, anytime within 3 days of being bitten. If the disease is not cured within 3 days, you will become a full-fledged vampire the next time you sleep. During your sleep, you will experience a particular dream, which signifies that your transformation is complete. All fast travel will be prohibited except intervention spells and scrolls and Proplon indices, so you may want to prepare those before becoming a vampire. Additionally, one vampire quest requires vampire dust, while another requires a Daedra's heart, so you may want to purchase those before becoming a vampire, since you won't be able to shop at any non-vampire merchants afterwards. Finally, you may want to obtain the gold brand first, since you can only acquire the Elton brand from it while a vampire. You receive a number of bonuses to your attributes, skills, and other abilities upon becoming a vampire, depending on which clan you're in. Your bloodline will be the same as that of the vampire who infected you. 1. Plus 20 to strength, willpower, and speed. 2. Plus 30 to sneak, athletics, acrobatics, hand-to-hand, unarmored, mysticism, illusion, and destruction. 3. Immune to paralysis and common disease. 4. Plus 50% resistance to normal weapons. Not bad. 5. Vampire Touch spell, which absorbs 10 to 30 points on touch. It will always have a 100% success rate. 6. Additional bonus based on the clan you've joined. Onde clan, additional plus 20 to willpower, shortblade, mysticism, and destruction. Bernie clan, additional plus 20 to agility, sneak, unarmored, and hand-to-hand. Quora clan, additional plus 20 to strength, blunt weapon, hand-to-hand, and heavy armor. And 7, a few useful artifacts such as Eltenbrand, Spellbreaker, and the Dark Sun Shield are only available as a vampire. There are several disadvantages to becoming a vampire. Fortunately, most of the disadvantages can be counteracted or worked around. You do not regenerate health when you sleep. Fatigue and magicka will still regenerate as normal. The only ways to regain health are by using a spell, potion, or enchantment with either an absorb health effect, including the vampire touch spell, or a restore health effect. Note that absorb health cannot be a potion effect. You gain a permanent weakness to fire effect, which causes you to take 50% more damage from spells with enchanted weapons with fire damage effects. Consequently, you may wish to find a means to apply a resist fire or fire shield effect to yourself. This is less of a concern for Dunmer, who have a permanent 75% resist fire effect due to their racial perks. You also gain a permanent sun damage effect, which means you'll take up to 5 points of sun damage for every second that you are outside, during daylight hours 6 AM to 8 PM. To counteract this, you'll either have to stay indoors for those hours or equip constant effect restore health items to counter the life drain. It is impossible to learn any new spells as a vampire. There isn't a single spell merchant in either the base game or expansions who will teach you new spells, so it is highly recommended that you learn all of the spells you will need before becoming a vampire. Lastly, most people will refuse to talk with you. Aside from the Mages Guild and House Telvanni, everyone will either shun you or try to kill you. This can make travel much more difficult as boatmen, guild guides, and Silt Strider caravanners will not transport you, so you may want to collect all the Proplon indexes before becoming a vampire. It is also impossible to get any quests outside of the Vampire, Mages Guild, and House Telvanni quests, as no one will talk to you to give you the quest. Many Daedric quests are still available as well, because they do not require you to talk to someone to accept, merely to activate the shrine. However, Boethia's quest and Mephalla's quest both require you to talk to at least one person in order to progress through them. Another major ramification is that the main quest is inaccessible, unless you choose the back path, though this might ruin a good portion of the game for some people. Finally, if you commit a crime that results in a bounty greater than 1 gold, the guards that come to arrest you will not give you the option of paying your bounty or going to jail. They will attack you as though you had a death warrant. Fortunately, there is a cure for vampirism, but it is obscure and difficult to find. Once you have been cured of vampirism, you cannot become a vampire ever again. Specifically, you will still be able to contract porphyric hemophilia, but it will not progress to full vampirism. The simplest way to survive as a vampire is to complete clan quests and feed on cattle. However, joining a clan is not necessary to survive, and it is entirely possible to live as a solitary hunter of the night, as most of the population will shun you, and some will even outright attack you. It is very difficult to survive in towns and cities. However, a vampire can easily maintain a low profile and exist on a farm, such as the Dren Plantation, collecting plants with restorative properties from the fields whenever possible. If you are feeling particularly dark, you may also find a hut or house in the wilderness and kill its owner in order to use it as your own base of operations and sanctuary from the sun. A more exciting existence as a vampire can be found by traveling the countryside and staying in ancestral tombs, Kwama mines and caverns during the day, and hunting when needed. During the night, although this is primarily only a role-playing experience. The armor skill is very useful when playing as a vampire, as it is otherwise difficult to have your items repaired. Likewise, enchant is useful because there are no vampire enchanting services, although Corwin, the master trainer of enchantment, offers such services to vampires if you can talk to him. This, or a high level of enchant skill, provides a partial workaround to being unable to learn new spells, provided you have the spell type you wish to create a new version of. Spellcraft and personality are also vital in order to live a more civilized life as a vampire. A high personality will allow you to bypass many of the attempts to shun you, and training your speechcraft will aid you in raising the low dispositions that accompany vampirism. Being a vampire means that acquiring new spells, either by buying them or creating new ones yourself, is impossible. Make sure you have all the spells you need before becoming a vampire. There are 3 clans or bloodlines of vampires that you can be in the game. The Shadows of the Burn, not sure, the Mages of the Onde, or the Warriors of the Quora. You receive your bloodline from the Sirang vampire that affected you, yet that does not make you a member of a clan automatically, though most vampires belong to one of the 3 bloodlines. There are 5 vampires that operate independently of the clans, and there are clanless generic vampires of no bloodline. Just because you're of their bloodline, don't expect a warm welcome. The members have low disposition towards you, though they aren't hostile. Their leaders see you as an abomination, a freak mistake at best, and therefore expendable. You have to earn their trust and access to the clan's services by doing tasks of various kinds. Each clan has 2 quests which are offered only to its members, plus a generic 3rd quest, kill a dozen vampires of the rival clans. There are also 8 general quests open to members of any bloodline. Thus, you are limited to 10 of the possible 14 vampire quests in the game. Even if you complete all of the clan's quests, you can never actually join the faction, and the clan will not appear as a faction in the character panel. Finding the clans and actually making your way to them for the first time can be one of the most difficult tasks in the game. There are few, if any, hints regarding their locations, with the exception of the temple quest to kill Raxo Burn. In Galum Deus, there are 3 books, Surfeit of Thieves, Trap, and Incident at Necrom, that hint at the existence of the Onde, Bernie, and Quora vampire clans, respectively, but not their locations, and no clan is in a location remotely resembling the book description. While you can use Elmsevia and Divine Intervention to get to Dunmer temples or major Imperial cult shrines, this is very limited in scope, especially since few of these are anywhere near the vampire clan hideouts. In fact, these travel tactics are more useful for getting somewhere else from the vampire lairs. Even travel via the Proplon Chamber network is dependent on actually having the right Proplon indices, or the combined one from the Master Index expansion. Without that expansion to hint at the locations, actually finding the indices is difficult at best. Even with the expansion, it is best to have found all 10 indices before becoming a vampire, since obtaining some of them normally involves dialogue with NPCs. In Oblivion, vampires are people infected with porphyric hemophilia, an unusual disease. You can become a vampire either by choice or by accident, and can subsequently be cured. In addition, vampire NPCs will be encountered, both friendly and hostile. Unlike previous Elder Scrolls games, you can pass as a living mortal. Citizens and the Imperial Guard will not attack you on sight if you are known to be a vampire. Yet, also unlike previous Elder Scrolls games, there are only 2 quests relating to your vampirism, one in which you become a vampire, and another in which you obtain the cure for vampirism. There are also no vampire clans that you can join, nor can you associate with or avoid being attacked by vampire antagonists. However, you can perform the Order of the Virtuous Blood quest while you are still a vampire. Skills that gain a bonus: acrobatics, athletics, destruction, hand-to-hand, illusion, mysticism, sneak. Attributes that gain a bonus: strength, willpower, speed. Unlike most skill boosts, these skill increases are implemented as abilities, and therefore they increase the base value of your skills. One effect is that you gain skill perks such as the ability to cast more powerful spells. The abilities gained are Hunter's Sight, Night Eye for 30 seconds on self, Detect Life 100 foot for 30 seconds on self, costs 5 magicka, can be used repeatedly. Vampire Seduction, Charm 50 points for 20 seconds on touch, once per day. This skill can be used to bypass the huge disposition penalty that comes with being a high-level vampire. Reign of Terror, silence 20 feet for 60 seconds, demoralize up to level 6 for 60 seconds on touch, once per day. Embrace of Shadows, Night Eye for 90 seconds on self, invisibility for 180 seconds on self, once per day. Sun damage is the most obvious disadvantage of being a vampire. At 50% vampirism and higher, you will continually take damage whenever you are outside during the day, 6 AM to 8 PM. The amount of damage increases at higher levels of vampirism. To prevent sun damage, you need to return to 25% vampirism by feeding. As long as you do not sleep or wait rest after feeding, you will remain at 25 vampirism and be able to travel safely. The level of damage depends upon how bright it is outside. Damage reaches its peak of twice the base magnitude at midday. Cloud cover reduces the damage you take from sunlight, but does not eliminate it. Being underwater has a similar effect. There is no sun in any of Maroon's Dagon's plains of Oblivion, therefore vampires do not suffer from any sun damage while in Oblivion. The unique weather that appears in the plains of Oblivion also manifests outside the Oblivion gates, so proximity to a gate also results in no sound damage, although it takes a few seconds for the weather to change. However, you should take caution in Oblivion Plains as many enemies will use fire attacks and there are numerous fire obstacles. Whenever you are taking sun damage, you are unable to fast travel. Fast travel is only possible if it is initiated during the nighttime when no sun damage is being taken. You will not receive damage from travel that is done during the day when using fast travel. However, if you arrive somewhere during the day, you will begin taking damage. You can fast travel during the day from any of the houses that you own, except for the one in Anvil. You cannot wait outside during the day. At night, you can use the wait function, but you must stop waiting before sunrise if you are outside. If your character continues waiting while exposed to sunlight, your character will take damage and will eventually die. Your appearance will change significantly, and will remain so until you are cured. Your character will age by about 20 years, acquiring a wrinkled and pale complexion. If your character has an unusual skin color, this may be changed radically. Others will notice and comment on your appearance if you allow yourself to go beyond 25% vampirism. Your eyes will become a pale red color. You may also lose your eyebrows and facial hair. When you are a full vampire, people may refuse to speak to you, citing your obvious vampirism. This can be countered by raising the NPC's disposition to at least 100, for example using vampire seduction. Guards may refuse to accept yields at the 4th stage of vampirism, forcing you to run away or fight them to the death. There are 3 ways to become a vampire in Oblivion. You can only become a vampire once. If you become a full vampire and are then cured, you cannot become a vampire again. Complete all the contracts given to you by the senior Dark Brotherhood member Vincente Valtieri, and he will offer you the gift of vampirism, available through Darkness Eternal. In the Maroon's Razor download, eating the beating heart, taken from Misre Faethung, will infect you with Cannibal's Prion and Porphyric Hemophilia. Be sure to let the vampirism take hold first before you use Cure Disease to get rid of the Cannibal's Prion. You can also use the beating heart to make a potion of Porphyric Hemophilia if your alchemy skill is 100. Contract Porphyric Hemophilia from a vampire during combat. Each time you are struck with a vampire's melee attack, you run the risk of contracting the disease. If you are subsequently unable or unwilling to cure the disease, you will eventually become a vampire. Resist disease effects even if at 100% or higher will not decrease the chance of your character catching Porphyric Hemophilia. This is not a bug, rather it is a feature. One introduced in the 1.1.511 patch, possibly so that Vincente Valtieri would be able to give you the vampirism in Darkness Eternal. Once initially contracted, Porphyric Hemophilia will not take effect until 3 days have passed, at which point sleeping will trigger the full change into a vampire. After your first rest, night of sleep, 72 or more hours after contracting the disease, you will have strange dreams, visions. You will obtain some vampire skills. At least a day after your first rest, a second rest, nights of sleep, will cause more strange dreams, visions, and you obtain some more vampire skills. At least a day after your second rest, a third rest of night of sleep will cause even more strange dreams, visions. You obtain all vampire skills, and you will become a full vampire and highly vulnerable to daylight. Note that at least for the first night of sleep, if you are also due to level up, sleeping will only trigger vampire skills. A second nap will be necessary to increase your level and increase your attributes. For the first 72 hours after being infected with Porphyric Hemophilia, the condition is subject to the rules which govern any other disease, and can be cured in the same fashion. If you become infected and do not wish to become a vampire, you must drink a potion, eat an ingredient, example mandrake root or shepherd's pie, or cast a spell which cures disease. Alternatively, you could go to the nearest temple and receive a blessing at the chapel altar. If you do not cure the disease within 3 days, however, you can no longer be cured. At that point, the only way to prevent becoming a vampire is to avoid sleeping for as long as possible. In order to feed, a sleeping humanoid must be found. Feeding on an awake, stunned, paralyzed, or dead person is not possible. To feed, simply activate the person. Doing so while not sneaking will give a choice between feeding and talking. Doing so while sneaking gives a choice between feeding and pickpocketing. If someone else witnesses a feeding, it will be reported as a crime with a bounty of 40 gold. It is treated as an assault. Being caught by someone else while feeding also wakes up the victim. Feeding does not kill or harm the person, and they are not turned into vampires. One thing to keep in mind is that NPCs will not be awoken by your presence, if you are not trespassing. Public areas such as guild halls are a great place to feed because you can simply walk in without fear of being chased away. Being stealthy while feeding will rarely result in the humanoid waking up, with the exception of Imperial guards. Guards seem to often be woken up to the feeding and attempt to arrest you as a result. Guards can be avoided as they offer no special feeding bonuses. Feeding on any humanoid will garner the same results. Do note, however, that feeding on other vampires is impossible. Attempting to feed on another vampire will not get a feeding dialogue box, but instead the vampire will simply react as though feeding was never attempted. They will wake up for conversation if you are not sneaking, or you will enter the pickpocketing screen if you are sneaking. Vampirism in Skyrim is a disease that transforms players infected with sanguinaire vampirus into vampires, feared, blood-drinking creatures of the night. If the Dawnguard add-on is installed, and you have been granted vampirism from Serana or Lord Harkon, you will be able to transform into a powerful vampire lord with a lesser power. Sanguinaire vampirus is contracted from encounters with vampires. Whenever a vampire casts vampiric drain on you, there is a 10% chance for you to be infected with the disease. Initially, this is a normal disease that reduces your total health by 25 points and can be easily cured with a potion of cure disease, a vigilant of Stendar, or by visiting a shrine. At sunrise of the first day after contracting sanguinaire vampirus, a message will appear saying you feel strangely weakened by the sunrise. At sunset of that day, you feel a strange thirst come over you. If the disease is not cured within 3 days, it will progress to full vampirism, like all the other games, and the effects can no longer be reversed with a normal cure. If Dawnguard is installed, you can also gain vampirism by letting Lord Harkon infect you during the Bloodline quest. Alternatively, you can activate the Bloodspring and Redwater Den, or let Serana infect you, either at the end of the Chasing Echoes quest or after the core Dawnguard questline is complete. Vampirism takes a toll on its victims' appearances. When a human or elf becomes a vampire, their eyes become black with reddish irises, their skin pales, they grow fangs, and their faces become gaunt. Argonians and Khajiit eyes will have slitted pupils upon transformation. Argonians will have 2 sets of fangs, and Khajiit will have fangs like a saber cat. Argonians and Khajiit will have paler scales and fur. With Dawnguard installed, vampire eyes will glow yellow-orange. Some vampire faces also appear more bat-like or monstrous, with a slit running through their lip and a bat-like nose. Argonian and Khajiit vampires look the same with or without Dawnguard. Vampires are hated and feared by the general population, and Stage 4 vampires will be attacked on sight. The 4 major joinable factions will not be hostile towards Stage 4 vampires so long as you join before you reach the Stage 4 and are not caught feeding on any of their members. With Dawnguard installed, NPCs will only attack you if you are in Vampire Lord form. Full vampirism is made up of 4 distinct stages, starting at Stage 1 and progressing to Stage 4. You advance 1 stage for every 24 hours you go without feeding on a sleeping NPC. Feeding always returns you to Stage 1. As a vampire, you will experience both beneficial and detrimental changes, depending on your current stage. The longer you go without blood, the more extreme these changes will become. In addition, as you progress through the stages, you gain several unique powers and spells, some of which will grow more powerful with each stage. Returning to Stage 1 will remove the higher level powers and reset the remaining ones to their original strength. In order to remain at or return to the first stage of vampirism, you must feed on a sleeping NPC. To do this, press Use while crouching or standing over them and select Feed. Feeding should be done with caution, as witnesses will immediately become hostile. You can feed on almost any NPC that sleeps in a bed, including all races and even ghosts and other vampires, but not children. A sleeping NPC may become hostile if they wake while feeding and detect one of your followers. This can be avoided by having your follower wait outside or providing them with a muffle enchantment. The most effective and safe way to feed is to use an invisibility effect from either a potion, spell, or the Embrace of Shadows ability, since feeding is one of the few actions that does not cancel the effect. Followers can be fed on with total impunity, so long as there are no other witnesses. The vampire cattle are free to use for feeding. Much of this I didn't know. If you contract sanguinaire vampirus during battle with a vampire, you won't become a vampire yourself for 3 days. Until then, you can rid yourself of the disease with the Cure Disease potion, any blessing, or by consuming hawk feathers. Hawk feathers, huh? After the first 3 days of infection, or if you obtained your vampirism from Lord Harkon or Serana, the task of finding a cure becomes more complex. While visiting any inn, talk to the innkeeper or talk to one of the members of the Dawn Guard, ask them for rumors and they will send you to Morthal to speak to a man named Phalion. This will start the quest Rising at Dawn. However, if you are in the last stage of vampirism and do not have Dawn Guard installed, the innkeepers may attack you on sight, so you may need to feed in order to lessen the effects of your vampirism, making NPCs friendly again. You can also cure your vampirism by becoming a werewolf through the Companions faction. Once you contract lycanthropy, you gain 100% resistance to disease and cannot be reinfected with sanguinary vampirus by normal means while a werewolf. With Dawn Guard installed, if you were previously a werewolf at some point prior to becoming a vampire, you can ask Aelia to restore your lycanthropy once. Vampire Lord is a lesser power added by the Dawn Guard add-on that allows players with vampirism to turn into a powerful Vampire Lord. A large humanoid creature with sharp claws and bat-like wings. In order to gain this ability, you must accept Lord Harkon's gift during the Bloodline quest or receive it from Serana after chasing echoes. She also offers the option to infect you after completing Destroying the Dawn Guard or Kindred Judgment. The ability can be used in an unlimited number of times per day and at any point during normal gameplay. While not in Vampire Lord form, you will still have all the characteristics of a normal vampire. As a Vampire Lord, you will be able to use blood magic and other dark powers and can either levitate and use spells or remain on the ground and fight with deadly claws. In Skyrim, only the more pure-blooded vampires such as those of Lord Harkon's court have this ability, and according to him, the family's vampirism was a gift directly from Molag Bal himself. Accepting Harkon's gift will permanently align you with the Volkihar. The only way to become a Vampire Lord and side with the Dawn Guard is to wait for the option to be infected by Serana. The Vampire Lord power has the following effects. You will retain the Vampire Sight ability from your ordinary vampirism, but all other effects are either removed for the duration of your Vampire Lord form or replaced with a Vampire Lord version of the same effect. Your health, magicka, and stamina increase by 50 points each. Magicka regenerates 2% faster. You will gain the same unarmed damage as Khajiit and Argonians. Khajiit will, however, lose their claws ability. When outside during the day, your health, magicka, and stamina decrease by 60 points each. When outside during the day, health, magicka, and stamina regeneration is reduced by 90%. Ability to use the Vampire Lord version of Vampiric Drain, which has a damage health effect in addition to draining health, magicka, and stamina from your target. Vampire Claws, constant effect, which gives you additional health, magicka, and stamina, increased unarmed damage, damage resistance, and water walking. Bats, special ability which allows you to transform into a swarm of bats for 2 seconds in order to evade damage. The Raise Dead spell, similar to the Vampire Servant spell, granted with ordinary vampirism, which allows you to reanimate a fallen corpse to fight with you. While you are in Vampire Lord form, only the Amulet of Bats, Amulet of the Gargoyle, Ring of the Beast, or Ring of the Erudite can be used. All of your other equipment is removed automatically. You also will not be able to use your normal spells, dragon shouts, or powers, but your attacks increase in power and speed. You will move more quickly as well, but since the Vampire Claw's constant effect gives you the water walking ability, you cannot swim as a Vampire Lord. Once you transform, all summoned creatures, including dead thralls, will immediately die. Your racial abilities do not carry over into Vampire Lord form, but existing spell effects do. This includes passive abilities such as the Lord Stone, the Blessing of Mara, and the magic resistance perks from the Alteration skill tree. It also includes the Destruction Cloak spells and the Alteration Flesh spells. Vampire Lords are dangerous, fearsome creatures, and you will be attacked on sight if you are seen in this form. However, since NPCs will not recognize you, crimes committed in Vampire Lord form will not be attributed to you and will not increase your bounty. If you are seen transforming, 1,000 gold will be added to your bounty. The world was not built for Vampire Lords, so you may get stuck in some doorways while in this form. To avoid this, try turning sideways so that your wings go through the doorway first. In most cases, you can get through. When all else fails, the Bat's ability will get you out of tight jams fairly well. While in Vampire Lord form, you can choose to either levitate or walk normally. You can only cast your spells while levitating, and will need to stop levitating in order to fight with your claws. When levitating, your right hand is automatically equipped with the Vampiric Drain spell and cannot be changed. Your left hand is used for your blood magic spells, such as Summon Gargoyle or Raise Dead. By bringing up the in-game favorites menu, you can switch the spell in your left hand and your active vampire power. You will take damage as normal from long falls while in levitation mode. To descend to the ground and enter melee mode, press the sneak button. In this mode, you will fight using your claws in a similar fashion to werewolves. You can also perform a power bite attack that will count towards your perk progress in the vampire perk tree. To perform a power bite, use a power attack against a humanoid target when their health is extremely low. The power bite will not work if you do not have enough stamina to perform the attack, and it will work on any NPCs including other vampires, but not on creatures. You can switch between modes as often as necessary while in this form. Your active vampire power can be used in either mode by pressing the shout button, though powers must be briefly recharged before they can be used again. You will have a forced third-person view while you are a vampire lord, and you will not be able to access character menus or maps. Opening the character menu will open the vampire perk tree instead of your normal menus. You will not be able to pick up any items or start conversations, but you can activate switches, such as levers and pull chains, to progress through dungeons, though you will be unable to interact with objects preventing the use of switches, example the bones or scraps that must be removed to use certain switches. You can use the revert form ability to return to your normal form at any time. If you have summoned a gargoyle while in vampire lord form, it will not disappear when you revert. Unlike regular vampire abilities, which are determined by the stage of your vampirism, vampire lord abilities and enhancements are level dependent. The following abilities are granted automatically by the Vampire Lord form, along with the Bat's ability, which is the same regardless of your level. Other powers and other spells can be added by unlocking perks in the Vampire skill tree. Taken as a whole, I can see that for lycanthropy and vampirism in Daggerfall, Oblivion, and Skyrim, it's meant to complement your playstyle, though it will add and take away things in which you will have to adjust your gameplay for it. You can still continue the quests and main story like normal. For Morrowind, it's apparent that being a werewolf, and especially a vampire, takes the game in a radically new direction. Having to feed every night as a werewolf and not being able to speak to anyone but other vampires and the Mages Guild as a vampire prevents you from doing any other quests besides a difficult quest called the Backpath to complete the main story quest. I'm not sure what Bethesda was thinking here, but I think lycanthropy and vampirism changed Morrowind too much to even bother with. The game becomes being a werewolf or vampire, or both if you're able to become them. I think these creatures should complement your game, not change them to the point that it becomes overly tedious or just too limited to continue playing. Without being able to do quests in Morrowind, that would have me stop playing. We play these games for the story, not to be a nightmarish creature. But being a nightmarish creature while experiencing the story, now that is something that should have been the goal. So this would be the end of the game mechanics part of the video. As you can see, there were several things that were removed or changed from Daggerfall in the other games. But as I have seen and experienced myself, there are many Daggerfall diehards who focus just on what was removed since Daggerfall. However, any rational person wouldn't solely just look at that without also taking into consideration that for everything removed, much more was added to the subsequent games. Otherwise, doing so just exposes you for being short-sighted and or pushing some agenda. In this case, the agenda being that everything after Daggerfall was dumbed down or much of it removed just for accessibility, which is certainly not true. In this section, I wanted to compare Daggerfall's wide selection of character stats and skills and leveling up to the other games. In Daggerfall, as I said, there are 35 skills, and in Skyrim there are 18. For Daggerfall, skills govern almost every action you can perform. The score for a skill measures your proficiency in that field. A character who is adept at a particular skill has a higher value in it than a novice. While each skill is said to have a governing attribute, there are no in-game effects based on this relationship. The application of a skill is either passive or active, with the majority of invocations as the active type. This means the character is undertaking some action rather than just letting things happen. An example of an active skill invocation would be the jumping skill. The character skill is only applied when the player issues the correct command. Passive skills, on the other hand, are invoked by the Daggerfall game engine itself on the player's behalf. Medical is a prime example of a passive skill, because it is invoked each time the character rests on the character's behalf by the computer, even if the player's intention was to idle for several hours. Language skills are another example. Whenever one comes within range of a creature of the appropriate type, the language skill is automatically checked. If successful, the creature is rendered non-hostile. An action is resolved as a success or a failure by evaluating the governing skill with some random chance. The score of a skill is proportional to the probability of success in that action if given average circumstances. Naturally, some circumstances may be more difficult than others, and the skill evaluation process considers any applicable bonuses or penalties, but for the most part, one may consider a skill's score as a success probability expressed as a percentile. When a primary skill reaches 100, that skill is considered to be mastered, and all other skills will then be capped at a natural maximum of 95, still subject to enchantments which could raise them beyond. This limitation only applies to the 3 primary skills. The player may level as many skills to 100 as they like, as long as they keep their primary skills below 100. If any skills are between 95 and 100 when a primary skill reaches 100, they will remain capped at that value. Skills in Daggerfall are listed as a percentage. In subsequent games, your skills are just a number, and you may also see a percentage next to that number which tells you how close you are to reaching the next higher number. Skills are a major part of the RPG mechanics of the Elder Scrolls, and for every 10 skill points gained in Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim, you gain a level. For Daggerfall, it was a bit different, and much more complicated. To simplify it, you will gain 1 level for every 15 points gained in your primary skills, 2 highest major skills and highest minor skill, with the exception of your first level up, which only requires 2 such points gained. So, per level in Daggerfall, your character would require more skills improved than in subsequent games, meaning your character would be tougher per level. The following is awarded each time a character gains a level: 4 to 6 attribute points. Increased maximum hit points, ranging from half of the class's hit point roll to its full value, plus or minus its endurance modifier. For example, a character with a hit point roll of 10 and an endurance of 60 will gain 6 to 11 hit points. For all of the Elder Scrolls games, increasing your skill points and leveling up is a benefit, though one could argue that in an unmodded Oblivion with the level scaling issue, the opposite is true. But in general, yes, your character is improving that skill when it increases, and when you increase your level, 1 or more attributes improve, along with more health, magicka, and stamina. Morrowind and Oblivion pretty much had the same rules as each other when it comes to leveling. Based upon the attributes that those primary and secondary skills required, you would then be able to select an improvement of 1 or more points, determined by the skill attributes. All of which was thrown out in Skyrim. Attributes are still important, but were so condensed down from 8 different types to 3 that a lot was lost along the way. Strength is now strength and endurance combined, while stamina is, well, stamina, and magic is now willpower and magicka. What happened to personality, agility, and luck? The last 3 are now completely gone from the game. Despite everything else that was removed from Skyrim, this is the #1 most pointed at issue for accessibility. I am glad that Todd Howard acknowledged that they lost some of the role-playing elements from more recent Bethesda games. It was hoped by many that Starfield would have more character stats in the game. After playing through Starfield, I can say that more were put in and used in the game mechanics, but it was just a small step. I believe we need a lot more to get back to Bethesda's roots, though a small step is better than none. Alright, setting all of that aside, we can now move on to examining the skills of Daggerfall. Again, there are 35 skills in the game. I've cropped it all to better organize it into what you see here. There are 6 schools of magic. As you can see, there is no conjuration school, and no ability to summon undead or Daedra to help you in combat in the game. Instead, they further broke down what the schools of magic compared to later Elder Scrolls games with a spell school called Thaumaturgy, which by definition in English simply means the working of miracles or magic feats, which is the school for the levitation spell. After Daggerfall though, Thaumaturgy no longer exists as a skill and spell school. The spell schools get a little reorganized after Daggerfall, with mysticism disappearing for Skyrim, However, there is another missing skill in Daggerfall that the later games have: alchemy. It's not among the skills here, but you can get potions in the game, and quite a few of them. In the later games, you either buy, steal, loot, or make potions yourself. Also, enchanting is not a skill either. It was put in for Morrowind, which I have never used, as I had the NPCs enchant my items and didn't even realize it was a skill until the very end of my Let's Roleplay of Morrowind. This skill was removed for Oblivion, only to be brought back in for Skyrim. Actually, enchanting is one of my favorite skills in Skyrim. I really like how it was implemented into the game. This is another case where more was added and not taken away for the subsequent games in the series. Then there are 9 combat skills. Oddly, only 2 out of the 9 use strength. Other than dodging, the rest use agility. I would have had Longblade use strength if I had programmed it. Dodging is also bugged in the latest game version of the original Daggerfall. Instead of helping you, it decreases your chance to be hit by skill divided by 4. It's listed under that skill in the UESP that it was fixed in Daggerfall Unity, which only makes sense that it would be at the top of the list. Among the 9 languages, I have also included the 2 skills you can use when speaking to NPCs, etiquette and streetwise. What languages do in the game is to make enemies passive when they are nearby. It really doesn't do anything else. However, when it comes to etiquette and streetwise, these are 2 options you can use when speaking to any non-hostile NPC in the game. But for etiquette, it goes further. You can use it to make both vampires and liches non-hostile, sort of how the languages work. Etiquette is used for certain factions, such as the Knightly Orders. Streetwise is used for peasants, the Dark Brotherhood, and the Thieves' Guild. To use them, select Polite for etiquette and Blunt for streetwise. Streetwise does not grant you the ability to pacify any enemy, however. Etiquette also allows you to pacify City Watch, at least in Daggerfall Unity, as you can see here where I bulldozed several people with my horse in the city of Wayrest. This wasn't listed under etiquette on the UESP for some reason, but I did find this out for myself. It pacifies some guards, but keep on hitting people and more guards will come. And finally to thievery and miscellaneous. The reason I lumped in thievery with the others here is because there are only 3 skills for non-combat thief skills: lockpick, pickpocket, and stealth. I never really got to use lockpick. I did a bit. I don't think it was implemented right in the game though. Basically, you get one chance, and if you fail, you have to wait a significant amount of game time before you can try it again. It should be instant reuse like it is in the later games. However, I resorted to bashing down a door to get past it nearly every time. So it never stopped me from trying to lockpick first, only to try and get my skill up. I was able to unlock a couple of doors this way. I tried to use stealth with my roguish character, and I was able to raise it by several skill levels, but I wasn't able to sneak past an enemy. Climbing is only available for Daggerfall, compared to the games that come afterwards. I think it is very neat, though not including it in subsequent games isn't for me that much of a big deal. Jumping uses strength, and considering that there is only 1 skill in the game that uses endurance, which is swimming, I would have also included jumping as using endurance as well. This ability is in all 4 Elder Scrolls games I'm comparing here, though there is no skill for it in Skyrim. It changes to acrobatics in Morrowind and Oblivion. Medical, another skill you won't see again after Daggerfall. It's simply the ability to heal faster when you rest, which is a skill you will probably use a lot since you will be resting a lot. Mercantile is like in the other games after Daggerfall. It checks your personality to get better prices when you buy and sell with merchants. Running is the only skill that uses the speed attribute, which sort of makes sense. This skill changes to athletics for Morrowind and Oblivion, which combines both running and swimming into 1 skill. It's gone in Skyrim. Swimming is in all open-world Bethesda games, at least for Daggerfall and afterwards. Before trying out Daggerfall Unity, I didn't even realize that there was a dedicated swim skill in any Bethesda game. Unfortunately though, it is not a big deal, but you can still swim in Starfield, but you cannot dive. Why this is so, I do not know, but yes, I was a little disappointed in that. You can dive in every previous open-world Bethesda game. Swimming in Daggerfall is a little unintuitive. You have to really look at the keys you need to use to go up and down, as it doesn't function like any of the other games Bethesda has made. Yes, I did drown the first time, but I was surprised my character was able to hold his breath for so long. and the reason for that was because he's an Argonian. One final skill is missing from the list: Speechcraft. It's a skill in Morrowind and Oblivion, and was converted to a perk in the perk tree in Skyrim. But it is there in all later games. I suppose you can use etiquette and streetwise here in its place, though. It has been said that Skyrim went to extremes to make the game more accessible, and dumbed down for the average person to play. For attributes, I can sort of believe that, but not for skills, which were slightly reduced from Oblivion, which in turn were reduced in number from Morrowind, and again reduced from Daggerfall. Perks are something a lot of people seem to ignore for mechanics in Skyrim when arguing that Skyrim lost a lot. No, it hasn't lost a lot, it just changed many skills and even attributes to perks. As I said, Skyrim lost attributes, and I don't like it or agree with it, but in terms of lost game mechanics, they just changed them to a different form. That being said, some skills were added into subsequent games from Daggerfall. Daggerfall isn't the length and breadth of skills and RPG mechanics that made it the ultimate and untouchable Elder Scrolls game, as some people make it out to be. After going through it all, I think Daggerfall is much more limited than people give it credit for, though things changed later on in the games. I think for everything taken away, they more than made up for it with new game mechanics that weren't in Daggerfall. So let's list them here. What Daggerfall had in major game mechanics that no other games in the series had. Daggerfall positives: climbing, languages, banking, owning a boat, doorbash, trial, large game world, reputation system, many guilds, most armor, clothing, jewelry, slots, lots of holidays, the most skills. Four mechanics that Daggerfall didn't have, that two or more of the other games had, or that were just poorly designed mechanics in Daggerfall. Daggerfall negatives: no conjuration skill, summoning. No alchemy skill, poison weapons. No enchanting skill, poor sneak mechanic. Languages only pacified enemies. Poor lockpicking mechanic. Very dungeon-centric. NPCs had no personality or voices. Very dated graphics, sounds, music. Limited character appearance choices. No third-person view. And many skills not very useful. I think many people who love Skyrim are tired of the bashing of the game in the last 12 years. When people compare Daggerfall to Skyrim especially, since apparently Daggerfall had it all. I read this from someone in a Daggerfall forum when putting together this part of the video. They cut out spell creation, combined a few armor pieces, and removed what they think were spells abilities that didn't suit the game. They added romances, dual-wielding spells, dual-wielding weapons, more voice actors, dragon shouts, dragons, more weapon spell combinations, and more ways to use them, the ability to sprint, etc. How are all these additions not adding to the game, especially when there are far more things that they added than took away? My feeling is exactly. Sorry, Daggerfall did not have it all, though it was one of the greats for its time. This would be no different than me comparing Skyrim to some future Elder Scrolls game that comes out many generations from now. Elder Scrolls generations, I don't mean human generations. And proclaiming that Skyrim had it all, unlike the Elder Scrolls 10 that sucks and is dumbed down for player accessibility. I am 100% positive that there will be many new game mechanics in future Elder Scrolls games that Skyrim didn't have, even if they remove and or change things that were in Skyrim. So then let's look more at Skyrim now, and at what many people view the game as worse because Bethesda decided to make it so accessible. Choosing nothing but your race and sex at the start of Skyrim seems extremely limited, though granted it did have the best of the choices in creating your character's looks out of all four games being compared in this video. However, the perk tree is for the most part how you create your character. You don't do it all at once anymore. It's now a character you create as you play through the entire game. It's a different style and something that I think was quite jarring to many at the time Skyrim came out. Is it better? Well, as I keep saying, Skyrim did lose attributes, and I do wish that they kept them in the game. However, on the other hand, I really do like to choose my perks and tailor my character as I level them up. So maybe it comes down to just personal preference? I like the perks of Skyrim but miss the attributes. though I wouldn't want the Elder Scrolls 6 to have no perks and return to just skills for everything. So I think that would rankle a lot of Elder Scrolls fans if they did decide to go that route. Many of the skills, none of them, are just languages that make enemies passive in Daggerfall. Some others aren't even that necessary, such as swimming. I say that because it's the only game of the 4 that has a specific skill for it, and I certainly didn't wonder why there was no swimming skill in the other 3 games. Same with medical. These are just skills that really, I don't think many have missed in later games. I do believe for swimming, just having racial bonuses would be enough. Morrowind is the only game after Daggerfall where I used rest in dungeons, and nowhere near as often as I did in Daggerfall. Eventually, and not that long into my Let's Roleplay of Morrowind, I was able to use enough restoration spells to improve my health after or during combat. In Morrowind, I found that I could do this quite easily, even with low magicka, but perhaps this is just something I needed to get used to in Daggerfall. You know, like getting good with one of the temples, train, buy the spells, and practice using that restoration skill, which I admit I didn't do as much as I should have. I didn't swim to the bottom like I did with the other 3 games, but I did dip my head fully into the game at times, if that metaphor makes sense to you. When taken as a whole, Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim all have around the same amount of skills. They just combined them, took some away, added in new ones, and with Skyrim added in quite the expansive perk trees. I'm not someone that would declare I wouldn't play past one of the games because the next game had less game mechanics in them, which apparently some Daggerfall fans did when Morrowind came out. All of these games have the same type of gameplay though. Talk to NPCs, get quests, go out and kill, loot, return to the NPC for the next quest, level up, get better equipment, rinse and repeat to the end of the game's main story and or all the side quests are done. Though the graphics, animation, and sound have greatly improved from Daggerfall to Skyrim, all of the games are essentially in the same basic spirit of gameplay. I don't believe that Skyrim lost its status as an RPG because most of the attributes were removed from Oblivion and there were less skills. Instead, as I have said, much of the game's stats were put into perks. This has been said from Morrowind to Oblivion to Skyrim, each in turn from the previous game. They all had game mechanics removed and were dumbed down to grab more players or put into one word, accessibility. Thinking this way isn't taking into account the numerous things that were changed and added as the game series progressed. When you look at the amount of clothing and armor you can wear in Daggerfall and Morrowind, which were pretty close, yes, there were more of them compared to Oblivion and even more than in Skyrim. This among many things that were in Daggerfall and Morrowind that were not in Skyrim. However, what about all the other things added in Skyrim that wasn't in those older games? Dragons, flying on a dragon, shouts, detailed face sculpting, a companion, full NPC voice acting, player marriage, smithing, a great enchanting skill mechanic, and yes, an extensive perk tree. So no, I reject the premise that each Elder Scrolls game was dumbed down from the one before it. I also reject that Skyrim is an action RPG now. They're all action RPGs. You still do the same thing in all 4 games. Skyrim just has much of its RPG element in its perks, which is now a character that develops his or her RPG stats throughout the game, unlike going through it all at the beginning like in Daggerfall. One thing that I am doing as I write this out is listening to the Mass Effect original soundtrack, among many other soundtracks. Yes, I have an extensive list of game and movie soundtracks that I listen to as I do my writing. The Mass Effect Trilogy series is what I'm listening to right now, and as I listen to it, my mind keeps on going to those games and how epic and movie-like they were in comparison to the Elder Scrolls games. Heck, even to Fallout 4 and Starfield, they don't even come close to them. The Mass Effect games are full of action and all about story, not about leveling up your skill in smithing, stealth, or whatever skill it is on a fetch or kill quest. It is very cinematic and feels like a movie-like experience for much of it. The difference is, especially as I recently played a heck of a lot of Starfield, is that Bethesda games are more like about living in that world, sort of how we live in ours. Of course, without all the tedium that we need to go through in our days, but it is typically not anywhere near as cinematic as Mass Effect. There are some memorable scripted story moments in the Elder Scrolls games, yes, but not a constant flow of it like it is in the Mass Effect trilogy. Ironically, Mass Effect Andromeda went more for the open world approach that's in Bethesda games. This led to a much larger game world, that took longer to play through, especially if you were to do all the side quests. I just heard that BioWare is working on Mass Effect 4 or 5? I think most people are saying 5 right now. It seems to be for certain, even though this news was said over about 2 years ago. BioWare has really lost much of its talent, and I hope that they can get back on track. I will always love the Mass Effect trilogy, even with the ending to Mass Effect 3. I think BioWare did their best work with the first 3 Mass Effect games. I didn't want to turn this into a what's best model, as I like both styles, and I don't mind some of each in my RPGs. I'm soon to get into Baldur's Gate 3, and I know that there are more cutscenes in that one game than probably all of what's in the Bethesda games and all of the Mass Effect games, including Andromeda combined, if not possibly everything both BioWare and Bethesda has ever created. Some people have attacked other RPG developers for this lack of content in their games that is in Baldur's Gate 3 by Larian Studios. I still haven't touched the game, so I suppose I will find out soon. But I do know this: if it has good RPG game mechanics in place, has an interesting world to explore, rich lore, and likable characters to join with you, along with a well-done story, then that all combined is the essential element of any RPG. The added 170 hours of cutscenes that are supposedly in Baldur's Gate 3 also do sound pretty intriguing. We RPG players want that good story, along with good gameplay and memorable characters. That's it. That's all we want. And to various degrees, each of the Elder Scrolls games has provided this, story and character being historically more of a BioWare element that they focused on. But despite this, they all don't have to be the same, and we shouldn't only enjoy one type. So when I take that all into consideration, what I also clearly felt when playing Daggerfall, really getting into it for the first time beyond my last video in the game's introduction, this time I tried to level up and do some of the major quests. I wanted to experience what this game probably meant to the people who played it back in the 90s. What I found was that using everything I know of what was around back then and what was in Daggerfall, well, I believe that playing Daggerfall back in 1996 that there was not much of a comparison to it by anything else. For me, the highlights of the 90s RPGs were Fallout, Fallout 2, as well as Baldur's Gate. When I was younger, like in the first half of the 90s, they had all those gold box D&D games, and I played some of them, but none of them had that immersive world with people supposedly walking on by you in a city, living their own lives, which of course is limited to the day and night cycle in Daggerfall. I think I missed out on a unique game that nothing else at the time could match. Yes, I was pretty intimidated when I first read that there are 15,000 places to visit in Daggerfall, and trying to play the game with that in mind made me feel a little daunted. However, playing Daggerfall, I was also sort of transported back into the days of gaming of my youth. Back to the way things were in the 80s and 90s. Keep in mind, even though the majority of my viewers are millennials, I am Gen X, born at the end of 1975, and have seen an enormous change in gaming from the early 80s to now. Even the early 80s games on the various platforms back then are nothing compared to the changes that were in the late 80s. There were games in the 80s that you had to write an entire paragraph from right out of the game manual in order to proceed. I clearly remember this. It was my best friend and I being stumped on this when we were around 10. We still couldn't even figure it out. We tried to write it out letter for letter and we still couldn't get past it for some reason. This was for some obscure games we were trying to play. It was probably from the same company and we had a couple of them. I guess my friend bought them for cheap back then. Don't ask me what they were. I have no idea. Recently I bought and played through that awesome story game, Heavy Rain, probably around the year 2021, and then when I was finished, I had my wife sit with me and watch through an entire new playthrough from start to finish over a few days. She told me at the end that now she knows why I like video games. This coming from an obvious non-gamer, who nonetheless was hooked on watching me go through the Heavy Rain story. Seeing that she can appreciate a good story game, so I can appreciate the old game of Daggerfall for what it was in its time, even though it is seriously dated nowadays, even with Daggerfall Unity helping it. When I transported my mind back to those days, my younger days, where game manuals were essential to games, there was a high failure rate in combat where you needed to reload often or even start over. and frustration was as much of the experience as joy. No, this is not a Souls game. They're all like that back then. A time when your friend heard from another friend that he did this in this game, or this is how you get past this difficult part, and that's what keeps fueling you to continue playing the game. Because I missed out on playing Daggerfall in its day, this is where I needed my mind to go in order to appreciate the game I was playing. When I make my Let's Roleplay videos for my channel, I always do so with several of them running concurrently, or in other words, at the same time. One day for Skyrim, another day for Neverwinter Nights, etc. But they are all stories that are happening with a day or two from each other. Doing this, I cannot help but prefer one game over the other, so yes, sometimes I do not feel like playing Neverwinter Nights with that character I made for it. I want to play Skyrim and continue where I left off. But I make myself do it, just because I love to complete storylines that I've created within the existing framework of the video games. And well, I have my integrity to finish something I started, even if it's not too popular within my channel. The live streaming I started doesn't count, as those aren't Let's Roleplay stories, which are the foundation of my channel. That all being said, like a game I didn't want to make a Let's Roleplay for, I really had to force myself to play Daggerfall Unity. It's a game I can greatly appreciate for what it led to, but not what it currently is. It's not an easy game to love because of how dated it is, and the fact that there is no nostalgia for me to return to, unlike how it is for me with Fallout 2, and Baldur's Gate. I can and will create a Fallout series after my Let's Roleplay of Fallout 4 is completed, and I will have all that nostalgia within me to see it through without any regrets. But seeing how limited and dated Daggerfall is today, well, even if I did have nostalgia for the game, it's a large open world with a lot of tedium, virtually no NPCs of note, except maybe a few that you go and get quests from, and a very dry, frustrating combat dungeon system. It would be, in my opinion, too difficult to do a character story with, though I am not saying it is impossible. But then there is how I as the artist feel, and I personally do not want to make a character story with Daggerfall and play tens of hours of dungeon delving only for a few moments that might be worthy of inclusion in a story. Meaning I would have to cut a lot of it out to make it watchable, or worse, just record a ton of gameplay with little or no character development. It's just not an easy game to make a Let's Roleplay out of, so I choose to decline it. But that doesn't mean that I don't like Daggerfall. Look at what it's done for all RPGs. It's been a very seminal game. It is the son of the father of all open-world games, Arena. This open-world RPG style of game has led to award-winning games like The Witcher 3, as well as all the subsequent games Bethesda has done after it, expanding on that open-world concept. Even BioWare tried to emulate the open-world success with games like Dragon Age Inquisition, and more so with Mass Effect Andromeda. As you can see, Mickey D playing through Arena here. The guy's actually pretty funny with his commentary throughout. Some of what he says, I get it a second or two after he said it. Seeing this game, even for a few minutes, really reminds me of its subsequent game, Daggerfall. Even though I see a few more options here than I did in Daggerfall when I watched the video. Sneak into a room at an inn to sleep? Yeah, that's a new one for me. So I did a little digging, and I found out that there are indeed game mechanics that were removed from Daggerfall that were in Arena. So, even Daggerfall was dumbed down now, was it? I don't need to get too much into it, but you could destroy walls with magic, travel to every province, got a nice story-like description when you entered a building, and not all the city buildings look the same, that among several others. That's it, I declare Daggerfall dumbed down and just an action RPG, and I will only play Arena from now on. Guys, this is silly. Please just appreciate each Elder Scrolls game for what they are, instead of comparing it to the game that came before it. I even had someone make a comment in my last Daggerfall video that they only like the original Daggerfall and not Daggerfall Unity, even though Daggerfall Unity squashed a ton of bugs, is much easier to run than the original in this day and age. That and all the mods you can add to it. But nope, only original for him, I guess. His reasons and his replies literally made no sense to me, but to each their own. Personally, I like Skyrim the best, next would be Morrowind, then Oblivion, and lastly Daggerfall. All this for my own personal reasons that I've gone over in my game analysis videos in the last year. I can appreciate it when people say that Daggerfall is still their favorite because I can imagine what it was like back then. It was an open world RPG full of many game mechanics that nothing else had, not until Morrowind came into the scene 6 years later. So, do I like Daggerfall? Yes, I really do like what it has done for RPGs, and I would recommend it to anyone who has the patience and perhaps the nostalgia to play it. But I wouldn't want to play it now, not when I have the other 3 Elder Scrolls games to play. When I think of what Daggerfall must have been like for people back in 1996, I think back to 1987 when an even older RPG came out that blew my 11-year-old mind. Dungeon Master. I watched my friend play that game for many hours, and I always looked forward to it. I didn't have it for my Amiga 500 at the time, but my friend on his Atari ST did have it. It was a game that really just destroyed any RPG that was out there for my young self. I remember talking about it to my parents, and they were just like, "Yes, Ryan. That's nice, Ryan." I was so excited for it, I just didn't care if they were bored of me talking about it. So maybe that was my first RPG love? I did try playing some older RPGs in the 80s, but none of them were anything like Dungeon Master. I was really young, too. To me, this is what Daggerfall must have been like. Nothing else was like it at the time, and it was a game world that just drew you into living a life within it. Living that in-game life just like my recent experience with Starfield. This is the closest thing I can do to appreciate Daggerfall's actual gameplay today, but overall I don't think that I wasted my time doing the work for this video. Even if its views don't amount to very much, I liked the challenge and enjoyed a glimpse at a game that, without it ever coming out, I wouldn't be able to play my favorite RPGs of today. After all that, I think we've come to the end, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you want to see my Let's Roleplays, which are 100% in character, please go to my channel and select among many RPGs that I have completed, or the ones I currently am working on in my channel. There isn't much like a fully in-character role-playing video where I am my character, and it is like blending a movie with the game, as I tell my character's story within the game itself.